We're live, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the latest iteration of the integrated plan Scrutiny. As you're aware, we're scrutinising not only this coming year, but also several years into the future, so that we've got a consistent approach through the next 4 or 5 years. Welcome to everybody. We're going to launch straight into it. Can I just reiterate to everybody listening that we will have to push on with this. Time is of the essence. Please, please, please support your chairman and your fellow group colleagues in keeping it tight. Ask the question quickly and be ready to note down the responses. And we will meet at the end of the morning and at the end of the afternoon to consider the recommendations. So you will, I'm afraid, be required back at 11:50. So once your group finishes, please don't dash off. By all means, get on with life, but we will require you to be back for the recommendation session at 11:50. That's enough from me. Anthony, welcome. Welcome to you all. Anthony, please, the floor is yours.
David, thank you very much indeed. My name is Anthony Rowlands. I'm a county councillor. I'm a member of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and I'm chairing the session on adult care services. The Chair's just outlined the purpose of the session. This is evidence gathering, and colleague county councillors have 4 sets of questions that they will be posing, and I hope that there will be opportunity for a supplementary, and then for other members of the group who so wish to indicate that they'd like to ask a further question. But we do have a time constraint, as the Chair has just said. I'm hoping I can welcome Chris Badger, Executive Director of Adult Care Services, who I believe is accompanied, but he will be able to indicate, and also Tony Kingsbury, who is Executive Member for Adult Care Services. So without further ado, I'm going to call on County Councillor Alison Wren, if you'd like to ask your questions. Alison.
Thank you, Anthony. Good morning. Given your modelling for expected service requirements underestimated demand last year, particularly in older adults, how reliable are your estimates for next year? And how can you use the 1 and 2 phases of Connect and Prevent to provide significant savings if the numbers of adults with more complex needs predominate?
Thank you, Alison. Right, over to whoever wishes to start the answer, as it were. I'm not hearing anybody respond yet. Is there a technical issue on drawing the officers in?
We've probably caught them on the hop, Anthony, because of course they're expected to perform from 10 past. So
I think it's called an early kick-off.
Raising comments for your group. It looks like we're on hold until 10 past.
That's all right. We can. I practiced my introduction. I guess you probably want me then to reiterate it, and I'll just start again.
Yeah. Note to oneself.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hi, folks. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear. Loud and clear.
Yes, I can, Chris. Yes.
Morning, Chris. We got underway a little bit early because we had some time to spare during the chairman's announcement. So, if you're ready,
yeah, we've got colleagues here. We were just sorting our room out in the last 2 minutes, but we've got all the colleagues here. Let me take the background off so you can see everyone.
Do we have Tony?
Yeah, we've got Tony. We've got
Paul,
and we've got Paul online, and we've got Jackie too, so you can see us all there.
Good. I think we're good to go, Anthony.
Okay. Do you just want me to, as it were, start again?
No, I think we can launch straight into the question because the officers have heard your brief.
Okay. Thank you, David. So we'll restart, and Alison, we'll just start repeating Alison's question so that we get the flow between the question and the answer. So, Alison, could I just turn to you to ask the first question?
Thank you. Given your modelling for expected service requirements underestimated demand last year, particularly in the older people requesting help, how reliable are your estimates for next year? And how can you use the phases of Connect to Prevent to provide significant savings if the numbers of adults with more complex needs predominate?
Okay, over to you, Chris and Tony. Welcome. Yeah, welcome everyone. And just so colleagues know, I've got Matt Buckland here, our head of finance, Tony, and Jackie Aubrey, our director of planning and resources, and myself, Chris Badger. So we'll break that down into two. So the first one is that Alison, you raised, was around demography. We know that the sort of annual, the current overspend that we're projecting for next year on the budget's about, but looking about sort of 12 million at the minute. That will change. Hopefully, it comes down in the next quarter. So clearly, we didn't quite get our demographic projections right. That equates to about 2% of the annual budget. In terms of what that is. So one of the issues that I don't care is it's such a big budget that small percentage changes in terms of the calculations can have a big detrimental material impact on overspend. So we've worked hard this year to put even more effort into our demographic modelling. So we've looked at trends, Alison, from this year to look at how they might extrapolate into future years. We've also tried to do the demographic modelling as late as possible in the process. And usually you try and do things as early as possible, don't you, to be as planned and as organised as possible. But actually, what we're trying to do, one of the issues we found last year is that some of the demographic pressures hit us harder in Q4 last year after we'd set the budget. So we were then in a sense blind to the impact that would have next year because it happened after we'd made those decisions. So we've pushed back how we've set demography to be as late as possible to try and capture those trends. There's a bit of seasonality in demography, Alison, in terms of sort of older people, particularly over winter. So that's one thing we've done. Two things we've done. The other thing we've done, is clearly looked at those trends and done a deep dive into why some of those things have happened, particularly in supported living without adult disability, and revised our forecasts as a result. And ultimately taken a decision to prioritise significant investment in demography this year, which you'll see in the papers, which is built up on partly of demography for last year, in a sense catching up from last year, as well as what we think that extrapolates into future years. So we've been even more robust than last year. I can never say with full certainty that we've got it right because it's a demand-led budget on a big number and there's a lot of volatility. So but what I can say is we've done the absolute best. And clearly one of the things we'll be doing with all the teams is being really clear that that's the budget envelope we've got and that's one we're going to have to manage to and be really clear from the outset on that. And then on Connect and Prevent, yes, we've looked to scale that investment programme. I've said before and I'll say again, when you need to make savings relatively quickly, i.e. short term within the short early parameters of a medium-term financial strategy, the best bet for delivery of savings is to look at existing programs and expand them rather than starting something new. So we're confident in terms of how we look at things like enablement, the robustness of our reviews, how we target those, and even some of the early work we've done already this year to help us next year, having those preventative conversations with individuals we support much earlier to secure independent outcomes for them, which is also cheaper for the council and is therefore a win-win. I'm confident that that expansion of that programme is the best bet to make savings in the short term to deliver the stretch that we need.
Thank you very much indeed. Alison.
I have a very quick supplementary, if I may.
You may. Yes, do.
Thank you. So the Connect and savings, Connect to Prevent savings that you have proposed are 6.67 million, which is 60% of the overall savings within the department. If, as you were out by 7.3% last year with the older population, I'm still not clear on how you can use that programme if it is the older people who have more complex needs, so that it is much more difficult to obviously get them settled in their home in the Prevent programme. I'm still unsure as to where that extra money is going to come from. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll maybe bring Jackie in as well for a bit of insight to that. I suppose what I'd say in terms of the budget pressure last year, the budget pressure came much more from the learning disability and physical disability budgets, not the older people's budget. So we're clear to manage the demographic pressure in particular. We need that focus on adult disability, which is what the programme had already looked to do. Clearly, we've expanded some of our targets on that based on our confidence from what we've seen already this year. That being said, I think the thing with Connect and Prevent is to absolutely see it as a programme. So while it looks like we're putting all the eggs in one basket, or 70% of the eggs in one basket, Alison, as you mentioned there in terms of the sums, we almost need to see it as 4 or 5 distinct projects within that programme. So whether it be around reviews, making enablement more effective, and that's one that's particularly relevant for older people, as you've said, Alison, in terms of your example, or indeed identifying carers early. In a sense, we've said actually we've looked at a programme portfolio that looks to spread the risk rather than trying one thing to deliver all the savings, which is clearly risky. If during the course of the year one element isn't working as well as we want, or one element is working better than we want, we'll also look to switch our resources to deliver different things by taking a pretty dynamic view of what that looks like. I don't know, Jackie, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Just that we're not. Can you hear me, Alison? I'm conscious I'm a long way away from Chris's mic. No, I'm not. Shall I move?
Yeah, we'll just move Jackie next to the microphone.
While you're doing that, if any colleagues have other questions, we will have 2 or 3 minutes to receive those. Jackie?
Audio on. Right, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yep. Yeah, sorry. Trying to work the tech here. Yes, so I think that Chris is right. The programme, although sits under one programme in the efficiency saving, is a 5 work stream programme across a number of areas. 3 of those work streams sit with older people, with the majority of the savings coming from that effective enablement work, which is actually about making sure that more people have access to more effective enablement, to short-term enablement, to enable them to enable us to sort of prevent, delay or reduce their need for long-term care, and that the early signs of that are that is working very well and is ahead of schedule in terms of delivering savings in the current year. Small starts obviously in 24-25, but we have other areas within the programme looking at community connections and unpaid and identifying unpaid carers, particularly in the older people space initially. So trying to make sure that we link in with carers before they get to the point of crisis or where there's a crisis and we have to step in with potentially expensive solutions for people. So in terms of us being confident, we've got really good measures in place to measure our effectiveness on that programme. So I mean that's where we're doing in terms of focusing our attention on prevention and that enablement.
Thank you. I'll ask you one quick
Jackie.
question.
I hope that answers the question, Alison.
Thank you. Yes, there's a number of references in the responses to enablement, and it's in the papers as well. There, you will obviously be needing to recruit occupational therapists, as I understand it. Now, how confident are you about the supply of suitably qualified people?
Yeah, I mean, professional workforce, Anthony, is always something we've got to keep a really close eye on. Actually, our recruitment and vacancy level around social workers, occupational therapists is actually pretty good at the moment. So I'm confident that we'll have enough. Whether we've got as much as I'd always like, and whether that recruitment is easy as possible, no. But I think at the minute the vacancy level and such is at a level that I'm comfortable with. We've done a couple of things, Anthony, to help on that. For example, and it's only relatively recent development, but apprenticeship programs. So I think last year we had our first apprentice get fully qualified as an occupational therapist, and that apprenticeship program, as many of you would, I'm sure, agree, allows people to qualify while working and being in employment. Really good development opportunity within the workforce. So I'm confident about that. I also want us to always do the bit of work that looks at how well are we deploying and utilising the people that we have got. So what are we doing that might, for example, not be the best use of their time? Are we deploying our occupational therapists in the right places? And one of the things I think we need to do, and we'll do more of, is making sure we get that high level occupational therapy input early on in people's journey with us. And Anthony, reablement would be a really good example of that, rather than deploying more resource when people's outcomes are kind of have got narrower and aren't going to get any, aren't going to see as much opportunity for improvement. That's probably not a good use of resources. So we will look at how we position occupational therapists, which is so valuable to us, in a way that maximises reablement, which I think alludes to your point.
Yes, indeed. Chris, look, thank you. I am clock watching. I think we should move on to the second area of questioning, and I'll turn to Stella.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
I can hear you.
Good, great. First of all, thank you, all of you, for being here, for the team for being here. My question is one that maybe wouldn't have been asked a couple of months ago. Given that in the recent years, HCC has been paying a premium above the threshold for care workers' wages, and that is now faced by national insurance and national living wage increases, how are we going to meet the challenge of continuing to attract care workers?
Over to you.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Stella. So look, this is a significant challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
For us. So 32,000, broadly 32,000 carers in the care workforce, paid carers in Hertfordshire, not all of whom work with contracts that we lead, but the majority do. The vacancy rate in that workforce has gone down from about 9% to 6% over the last year. So that's a 33% increase or 33% decrease, in the vacancy rate, which is really something to be celebrated.
Absolutely.
We know that there's essentially two interrelated pressures on fees that providers are going to pay. So two interrelated cost pressures on providers that will impact the competitiveness of their salaries, and they are the increase in the national living wage, which has gone up by 6.7% this year. And that's gone up 58% since 2019. And we just leave that figure there. That's an enormous increase since 2019. National living wage is now well over £12, and it was under £8 in 2019. So significant pressure. But as well, we've seen the employers' national insurance increases. And what's been the issue there is less the kind of headline marginal rate of insurance, but more the fact that the threshold at the point where people start paying employers' national insurance has gone down from £9,000 to £5,000, and that particularly impacts part-time staff, which the care sector has a lot of. So we're left with a position there where we are going to struggle, and we've been pretty candid about this, we are going to struggle to meet all of the inflationary challenges that providers might face. because those just are numbers that the council isn't funded to deliver. I think the council's overall spending power went up by 5.5%. Some of those pressures look to be between 7 and 10% on care sector providers. So we just simply don't have that resource to be able to do that. What we have done and what we will do is, we've still got a significant amount of money going into inflation, £30 million. That's probably the biggest single line in the adult care budget. So in the council's budget in terms of growth. We will also be very careful in terms of the risk you've mentioned, Stella, to apply that to different sectors of the care market in a quite discerning way. So where have we invested a lot already, where we've got more of that buffer that you talked about, Stella, and where we've got less of a buffer, we'll need to invest more of that pot. We're clear that will be the pot that we get when this budget's agreed. But we will have to be really careful around, where that goes in terms of home care, residential care, nursing care, and look at what is the risk in terms of the buffer that we built up over and above the national living wage. Which bits can we probably risk closing a bit more than others, if we're honest, and that will be a judgment based on lots of data, but we can't ever be sure exactly how employment markets will work. And the final thing to say about that is a lot of the increase in workforce in care has been driven by international recruitment. So there's been 110,000 international recruits nationally over the last 2 years coming into care. That's another dynamic which impacts on the employment position and the competitiveness of wages. So we're going to have to keep a really close eye on it. We're in a better position than most because we've been able to invest in the care market over the last 3 or 4 years, I think about £150 million over how many years, Matt?
About 6 years.
Over about 6 years. So that has built a buffer. Councils that don't have that buffer will face a bigger risk than this council does.
Thank you. Stella, do you want to come back with a supplementary?
I have no supplementary. Thank you very much, Chris, for that in-depth answer. I can see what you're up against.
Thank you, colleagues. Any other colleagues who would like to ask a question on this section? Do indicate. In the papers, it indicates that you'd, I think as reference to fairly recent months, seen a tailing off of international recruitment. Does that remain the case at the moment?
So it's difficult to necessarily get all the data together, Anthony, accurately, but we have seen certainly if I take the national picture, nationally there has been a very significant reduction in the number of people coming in on visas. So there's 2 reasons for that. One is they changed the rules last year so that if you came over on a care visa, you couldn't bring a dependent with you. So that was one, and there was another couple of changes around the margins, but that clearly made it a less attractive visa for international entrants. So there has been a reduction. What we haven't yet seen, though, is those people that came over in international recruitment leaving at a significant level. So they're remaining relatively static within the workforce. So while the number coming in is reduced, we've not seen the total number working in the sector reduced by nearly as much. There has been some tightening up too in terms of unscrupulous care providers, and we've had some in this county who have used the visa route as a way of bringing people in, whether or not they really want to be delivering care or not. But what I want to stress here, Anthony, is that the majority of our international recruits have got great values, work really hard, and really welcome to work in the care sector. But as with any, recruits, whether they're domestic or international, there are some that are better than others, have better values than others. There are some care providers that have that are better run than others. So I'm really clear that as a county, we should welcome everyone into the care sector based on their values, and that's going to continue to be important. But we will need to keep an eye on immigration policy because it will have an impact.
Thank you, Chris. We've got a couple of minutes left. If anybody else in the group
Chair,
wishes
could I ask a follow-on?
Yes, do. Yes, of course.
Interesting, Chris. So talking about international workers, and you're talking about standards. How do we manage those standards with our care providers? Because you said some are better than others. That immediately rings a bell in my head. That means some are not, as Are people getting a lesser service as a consequence of that statement?
Yeah, I mean, Stella, you know, in any workforce, you know, in 32,000 people, of course, there's going to be variable quality. Our efforts to make sure that none of that quality falls below the standard we would expect. And I think the rule we would take is, if that was care for you or one of your relatives, would you be happy and content with it? And I think that's the standard we should take with all of that. There's essentially two major mechanisms for monitoring the quality of what's provided. Firstly, most of the care that we commission and most of the money that we spend is care that's regulated by the Care Quality Commission, who, as you know, provide independent ratings of formal care settings, so supported living, home care, residential and nursing care. We work very closely with them. In addition to that, we have our own monitoring teams that monitor care quality where we contract for care, and they'll go out and, probably much more in our control because those teams work for us, and we'll monitor the quality of provision. And we use something called PAM, Stella, which is you'll know is a tool for managing the kind of compliance against the contract and our care standards. That's actually a regional framework, so we can monitor providers against performance in other parts of the region too for benchmarking. All of those monitoring tools are designed to be objective, and not designed to be punitive, but designed to focus on areas where that provider can improve. So as well as saying, you know, this area needs to improve, we'll say, and this is the support, for example, through the Hearts Care Providers Association that we support, or through our own direct teams. This is the support that you can utilise to improve your practice, whether it be around leadership, moving and handling training, safeguarding, whatever the need might be, because that monitoring process has to drive improvement. So those two key planks of our approach, I think, are robust. And the CQC inspection that we had that was published in May was keen to point that out. So I'm assured that we do everything we can to monitor that quality, but we need to absolutely stay on our toes.
Thank you, Chris. Let us then move on to the third section. Nigel, welcome.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chris and your team. Very straight to the point here. How will efficiencies identified be delivered without impacting frontline services? And then after that, I've got what additional ways have been identified for generating additional income?
Okay. Jackie, you okay with the...
Just making sure you can hear me. Okay.
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Thank you. So as you'll see from the paper, is the main savings that we've got is the Connect and Prevent programme, which over the life of the integrated plan delivers over £25 million worth of savings. Yeah. And this is a transformational prevention programme, but really builds on the strengths of our current Connected Lives model, particularly in the area of Connect and Prevent. So it strengthens that model and delivers improved outcomes for people we support by enabling them to remain more independent for longer. And that sits across the whole programme. And as we've said, as a result of that delivers efficiencies, which is on care purchasing, by improving the effectiveness of both our preventative and enabling approaches that we would use as part of our work. So it's strengthening that and getting that consistent across the whole of adult care services. The details of the programme are shown in Appendix C of section of Part A of the integrated plan, in terms of the 5 work streams are set out in Section 8 of that area. But the areas that we're focusing on, and I've talked a little bit about this already in terms of answers to Alison, is that we're looking at unpaid carers, looking at preventing carer breakdown, and also another line in the integrated plan is an investment in a carers hub, in terms of making sure that we've got a way of making a connection with carers, so that they've got a connected person that they can talk to help them navigate what is a complicated system for people that are in it, let alone people that are out on the outside. The second work stream is around improving community connections, so making even better connections for people with their communities and with the support that's available through organisations. And then the third work stream, also in the older people space, is about maximising the use of our short-term enablement. So actually the provision that we've already got in terms of enablement care, making sure that we are making the best use of that we're making sure that that's available to more people, and making sure that it's more effective. So actually making sure that we're building in even more challenges for ourselves in terms of making that more effective to enable people to live independently. And the whole of that is around preventing, delaying or reducing people's need for long-term care, which again gives better outcomes for people and delivers savings and efficiencies on our care purchasing budgets, which is always a good, well, for me as an accountant, always a good sign of a good saving if it's actually delivering better things for people without actually while delivering savings at the same time. The other two areas are around work with learning disabilities. They focused on our learning disability population of people we support, particularly around progressive reviews. And that's about making sure that our reviews are more focused on independent goal setting with people to work towards them being more independent and supporting them to do that. And then the final one is about making our transitions for younger people, moving from children's through the 0 to 25, making sure that we're more effective at making that transition, getting people ready for being as independent as they want to be, because the people that in the children's world and then they move into the adults world, different legislation, different expectations, and preparing people for that and making that a better experience for people, but also enabling them to be as independent as possible. So that's the first saving, and you see that's significant, and as you said, Alison, is over 70% of our savings in 25-26, but equally ramps up to be even more than that by the time we get to the 28-29 year. As Chris said, because that programme is proving to be successful, that we wanted to actually look at extending that and building on the foundations that we're establishing. It has to be said that the workforce and the workers that are involved in the work streams are really positive about this way of working. We're seeing a really good take up of people being really enthusiastic, and it's showing benefits. So we want to extend those benefits to other areas. So we want to look at explore whether the opportunity for looking at people who are at risk of falls, and then embedding independence through focused decision making, particularly looking at the assessment stage, making sure that we're really focusing on that independence, and then broadening our progressive reviews approach from learning disabilities and extending that into the physical disability space. But our thinking is quite at early stages at the moment, and we need to do some detailed diagnostic work to enable to really be confident about where we focus our attentions. The other savings that are listed in the IP are all relatively small, and they are where we're taking opportunities to use alternative funding from government. So we're not actually cutting the service, we're just using different funding streams to fund it. We're taking the opportunity to take a dividend from our in-house provider of home care, and that we're doing various efficiencies as we recommission services. We're taking the opportunity to take efficiencies out of the programme without actually cutting services.
Okay,
So
I'm going to Jackie, we've got a finite time, and I want to allow Nigel to come back with any supplementary.
Okay,
so
I haven't answered it. I'm
seconds.
conscious I haven't answered the income question, but I'm happy to.
Sure.
I'll happily pick up whatever you want, Nigel.
Okay, no, so just on what you've been talking about and the efficiencies, and that's good you went through that list. I say list, but obviously in trying to say how on our question about how will the efficiencies be delivered without impact frontline services, you talked about obviously at the hub, the connected person, short-term enablement care. Then you went on obviously learning disabilities, progressive about the reviews, and then of course about the 0 to 25 young people enablement stage. So is it making sure that you have, for example, that connected person, for example, on the hub? It's things like that, I suppose, that if they didn't have that connected person, if something went wrong there, or on the learning disabilities, you've got the progressive reviews, if something was held up there, You know, I'm just saying all these different things you pointed out, if that all goes well and efficiently, these efficiently wouldn't affect the front line. I'm just trying to think, well, if then something went wrong or didn't work on all those things you mentioned, that I suppose would be how, if you like, front line, the cuts, people would be coming back to us saying, well, hold on, we used to get this and now we're not getting this, and say, oh, well, that's fine.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, is there anything there that we should be concerned about? You're confident that all those things you mentioned would go ahead and it wouldn't come back to affect, say, the front line, our residents saying, well, we used, it's now worse.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's about that actual helping people to achieve their goals of independence, and actually making that actually then ends up costing us less in terms of care purchasing budgets. Admittedly, if that doesn't work, Nigel, then yes, we will be looking at it, but we've got really strong monitoring in place to make sure that we're really viewing the impact of those of the program, but also doing it alongside our budgeting. So we've got a lot of measurements going on, both operationally, the impact on the person, and the financial impact, and making sure that we're looking at that in the round with the budget, so that we're really conscious that we can make this work. I mean, managing the demand, as you've seen, the demographic pressures that we talked about at the beginning, is the way forward in terms of us managing our budget. It's the only way we can manage our budget in terms of managing that demand. And if we can be successful at doing that, whilst actually delivering better outcomes for people, then that's got to be a good thing from my perspective.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm going to turn to, I've got to move.
What about my additional ways?
Allow, if I may, Nigel, you've had a supplementary, allow Terry to ask a question, and then I realise we haven't really addressed the second part of the question, and I may be asking you, Jackie, to supply something in writing so that we've got a response on that if we can't cover that in the time.
Fine.
Terry.
Okay, good.
No, fine.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. I was just going to ask about the fees and charges. What type of increases are they, and what are they actually impacting? Because obviously that has a bearing.
Okay. I can answer Nigel's second question and answer yours at the same time, Teresa, if that's okay. So what we've done is, I mean, in context, we should see that the Adult Care Services income budget from fees and charges is in excess of £80 million. So it's a significant figure. So although 1.2 million might seem like a lot, in terms of percentage terms, it's actually about 1.5. It's quite small. But what we've looked at is everywhere where we can improve our income processes without actually changing our policy. So we've looked at making sure that we are being much more efficient in the way that we are dealing with charging people. It's not an easy conversation to have, but we're also, by that, we're able to then charge people when their care starts, which is actually when they are due to be paid. And we're just things like migrating people who have direct payments onto prepaid cards. That makes us actually the administration of that much easier. We're improving our processes around debt collection, which means that we don't have such a big impact from bad debt provision. And then we're looking at making sure that we fully recover all the money that we're entitled to recover, and that we're making sure that we do that. So it's really just applying our policy as fully as we can, and making sure that we've got our processes more automated through things like prepaid cards, so that we can actually recover money that's sitting there much more easily. So it's really about improving our processes and making sure that we're making the full use of our current policy.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to, Alison, you'll have to forgive me. I must move on to the final section, given where we've reached time-wise. Accommodation. Fiona, the floor is yours. You're muted.
You're on mute, Fiona.
Do this one, Jack.
Muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Fiona.
Yes. If you can hear me now, then how will the potential savings of the proposed changes in the provision of accommodation towards the end of the IP period be assessed?
Thanks.
Chris.
Thanks, Fiona. We'll just get that right done. Yeah. Good question, Fiona, and as you'll see that they come later in the IP process, because obviously they take some time to come through. But there is I think interesting point here that there is an interplay here between the revenue budget, which is what the main focus of the inquiry so far has been, and the capital programme, i.e. those monies that we can invest as a council in partnership with registered providers and Homes England, etc., on developing forms of accommodation which deliver more independence for people, namely in adult disability. That would be supported living; for older people, things like extra care or independent living. So the way we assess that, Fiona, is looking at really broadly the proportion of people we're supporting in different care settings. So ideally what we want to see is either a reduction or probably more likely a reduction in the growth of people in long-term residential and nursing care for both older people and people with learning disabilities, and an increase in the number of people being supported in supported living or extra care stroke independent living. So we can quite easily look at the overall people we support and the proportions of those individuals in those different care settings. We've done the sums that say what the difference in support costs for people are in those different settings. They will fluctuate between different individuals, but when you look at an average, you can understand that. So we're confident that if we increase the proportion of people in X setting, that will deliver a financial saving or a cost avoidance saving against demographic pressures that is pretty consistent. And it will be monitoring of uptake of those placements that will be key to looking at the success of that programme and therefore the delivery of the efficiency.
Thank you. So I'd like to come back.
Yes, do.
Yes. The capital programme for the building of this accommodation is being funded by capital receipts. So what gives us the confidence that we will have sufficient funds in capital receipts to fund all the building?
So the funding for the capital scheme is actually varied. So the first thing to say, on a number of schemes, it won't just be the county council. So we'll be doing that with partners, whether it be district and borough councils, registered providers, Homes England. So there'll be a mixed portfolio of investors in those schemes. And we've got a couple of schemes that are already in the pipeline, so to speak, on exactly that model. Also, members will be keen to examine those proposals in a bit more detail. Certainly at the Cabinet panel tomorrow, the strategy for the expansion of supported living provision is coming in front of members at that meeting. So I think that's probably quite timely and relevant. In terms of disposals, that forms part, and Matt will nudge me or kick me if I'm wrong, capital receipts form part of the capital programme. But not all of it. There's also borrowing as well, and you'll see the borrowing, and other partner contributions, and the borrowing costs are obviously outlined in the IP too. But the disposals in the adult care element, it is a little bit clear, but in the sense that we've got in particular a number of supported living units that not all of them are of the kind of modern bespoke kind of build that we would like, and historic, and some of them will, in all intents and purposes, look like regular houses. And for some people those work, but for perhaps people with more complex needs or requiring wheelchair access and proper staff accommodation, they're no longer fit for purpose. We would be looking to dispose of some of those properties, but the strategy tomorrow builds in the policy that disposals from the supported living portfolio, the capital receipts from those disposals will go back into the supported living programme in the form of capital that's available for investment. Now, most of those properties, Fiona, are houses within Hertfordshire. We are confident about being able to sell houses within Hertfordshire, given the demand for housing, house prices, etc. So I'm confident that where we do need capital receipts, we'll be able to get those. And I'm also clear that the kind of borrowing structure to the programme relies on receipts, third-party contributions and borrowing. And as such, over the course of the programme, we can alter the percentages from each of those sources, depending on either the nature of the property market, what partners are able to do, and when we can and can't dispose of properties at the optimal value.
Chris, thank you very much indeed. Do any other colleagues on the group have a question relating to this final section? I'm seeing any. So look, I think that brings us to the conclusion of this session. My thanks to the officers, Chris, Jackie, for your answers. And my apologies if I've been at any time brisk or brusque. But we thank you for all your work as well. And I think we probably safely say that sort of within that you operate within a very difficult national context. And I suspect when historians look back at the first quarter of this century and study what governments of all stripes have done, it will be seen as one of the most areas of most striking failure. And I think we just have to remember that that is the setting within which we operate. And we're really grateful to you and your colleagues for all the work you do to ensure are supported. So my thanks to you, my thanks also to my colleagues, and we will draw up recommendations, and I've communicated how they will be forwarded to you. But thank you very much indeed.
Okay.
There we go.
Thanks, everyone.
Exactly 40
Bye,
minutes
bye.
since I started.
Thank you.
Not hearing anything. Just checking in the background, Tina.
Chair, we're now live.
All good. Live, ready to go.
Good morning. This evidence gathering session is focusing on the public health portfolio. We've got our Director of Public Health, Sarah Perman, and her team, and Executive Member and Deputy Maurice Bright and Rena Ranger, councillors. So now over to members of the Public Health Scrutiny for the questioning, please.
I think it was meant to be Terry Hone, but I believe he's having internet issues at the moment.
Well, I'm on.
You're on.
Hi, Terry.
I think Tina should be able to help. So, one of the issues that was raised by members of our group was what are the potential impacts of public health services, and has there been an impact on locality budget reduction on public health initiatives, because we all try and get involved in that. So thoughts, please.
Well, thank you and good morning, everyone, and it's good to be with you this morning. Thank you. Starting with a very good question. We know that there's always a lack of certainty around the amount of money that Hertfordshire receives in the public health grant. Like many grants to local government, it comes very late in the day. It did with the previous government. It has done with this government. And it adds more complexity to when we're planning for the delivery of health services in the next year. In particular, it makes long-term planning more challenging. It creates risks for services which public health commissions and for projects in the voluntary sector and districts that public health funders officers when they're not able to say whether funding is going to continue and whether there'll be an uplift. It creates problems for service planning because we don't know what to budget to plan for. So for the next year, we have Sarah Perman with us, our Director of Public Health. She's taken a deliberately prudent approach, and she's modelled a 1% increase in the budget because we've got no certainty if it will be more. So if you look at the figures for recent years, it's been 2.1, 3.3 and 2.8, which sounds okay, except the fact inflation was 12% when it was 2.8. So there was a real term loss, if you like. In respect of there was a mention of locality budgets. Hard to give a definitive answer. I am reliably informed that around 30%, just under a third of members' locality budgets still have to be allocated this year. There was, of course, a smaller locality budget pot this year. Nevertheless, I understand in the past that the allocation by members in this particular area was never particularly large and tended to be associated, as you'll know, with the provision and installation of defibrillators. But public health are now playing a more targeted role in community defibrillator schemes and bleed control kit projects, and they're led by public health, so their funding should be there. I hope that's fairly concise.
That's great, thank you.
No doubt some other members of back to you, Tina. I think others might want to comment on that.
Thank you. Does anyone have any follow-up on this area of questioning or any other questions? Tim, you're muted.
It was going to happen, yeah. If I could ask a question, Tina, just
yes,
basically on the defibrillator question there, sort of thing, the point being made. Do public health still offer a scheme out? Because I used to get, as a councillor, the email saying there's a defibrillators earmarked for your division. Does that still occur? Because I don't think I've seen it for the last 18 months.
I think that there was almost a map. In fact, there was a map, I think, being provided at one stage, which had showed where all the defibrillators are. Sarah, are you able to give us an update?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. So we have set aside funding from the core public health budget to support the rollout of more defibrillators and bleed kits across Hertfordshire, particularly looking at increasing provision in areas of higher deprivation. One of the ways that we're doing that is by converting some of the kits which schools and colleges have into defibrillators which can be accessed by members of the public. So where a school has 1 or 2 defibrillators, the excess defibrillator is being repositioned on the outside of the school so that it can be accessed by members of the community. But we will be able to follow up and provide you with a map of where defibrillators are and on the objectives of the scheme and future funding opportunities, if that would be helpful.
And can I just add, the reason why obviously the decision was made to place one outside of the school, you get lots of people congregating, children, but lots of adults congregating, and also for a security point of view, if it's inside the school and either the school is locked or you've then got to just let anybody into the school, that causes potential safeguarding issues. So we want to keep people safe and healthy, and if they have an attack, but at the same time, we don't want to open up the ability for anyone to get into a school.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you very much, Maurice. I look forward to receiving that map. Much appreciated.
Yes, the map would be absolutely fantastic. Moving on to any other questions.
Yeah, Tina, shall I go into question for the second question that we had?
Yes,
Yeah,
happy to do that.
Yeah, it's just regarding the Afghan funding. How much or how might the reallocation of the savings from the Afghan funding impact the staffing levels and the quality of services provided to those refugees? Is quite a crucial matter. Thank you.
Well, thanks. It's a very good question, and I think it's how you define the word savings. So the reallocation of funds, it'll have no impact on the current provision of support for the refugees, which is predominantly paid for out of other funding schemes. The money for which the Afghan Refugee Fund was originally provided to Hertfordshire County Council by the Home Office in 2021, with additional funding received in subsequent years, paid for a team of officers recruited to oversee the running of the 2 dedicated hotels that were housing the Afghan refugees. The resultant additional demands placed on local authorities, on boroughs, districts and on county. And it also funded elements of the voluntary sector, who, as you know, as many of us know, played an important role in supporting the refugees. These needs have now been met, and the support which the County Council in general and crisis management and humanitarian operations in particular provide is no longer required, given the closure of these hotels and the dispersal of the Afghans into the communities nationwide. So the staff that were recruited to deliver to support the Afghans were on short-term contracts, and they've now left the employment of Hertfordshire County Council. And the release of the funding for that team to the authority will enable County Council services to continue to meet additional demands generated by Afghan nationals now dispersed in our communities. And that's why in school places, other health services and so on, that's why I'm saying savings is a slightly odd word, because the money is being used, but it was kind of being used by other teams, if you like, and this is just dispersing what is left. So the residual funding, which is about £1 million, will be retained to support the County Council's continued obligations to asylum seekers in both dispersed accommodation and a number of the hotels in the county. I have to choose my words very carefully, but it is my belief that we will be seeing larger numbers than we have done in the last couple of years coming into the county as part of a wider dispersal scheme by this government. And so we need to ensure that we have some funding in case that is the case, because we have no idea how it will be funded by the Home Office. We just know that this matter will rise again, and we just need to make sure that we're there to help anyone that comes into our county, our boroughs and our districts.
Thank you. Do we have any follow-up on that?
Yeah, no,
thank you. Could I ask, Maurice, when it talks about a wider dispersal, of which community are you referring to?
I think that I've got to be very careful. The Home Office, as you know, is dealing with a large influx of people coming in from other countries at the moment via different sources, and they can't all be kept in one part of the country. And from what I'm understanding is, and perhaps Alex Woodman will be able to explain in slightly more detail, those numbers are going to be dispersed across the country. So that, from my understanding, it could be people who are legal migration, but it could also be people who are waiting to decide whether or not their migration applications are legal or not. Alex, is that I'm obviously being careful not to breach any confidences, but I do feel it's appropriate that members of Scrutiny understand some of the pressures that will be on us this year that they may not have even realised. Alex?
Absolutely. Yes. So, Councillor Brass, what we look at the minute, we have our structures through our Strategic Migration Partnership team. As Councillor Bright has said, our engagement through Home Office is we have that support structure in place that should there be any requirement for us as a local authority lead to provide placements, housing. What we don't have is, as we said, this is Home Office led. So we are notified of the areas where they are identified. It's not something that we have a direct control over. We will then support the engagement arrangements in place depending on wherever that need may be. And it's nationally mapped by Home Office. So we are a recipient of and put structures in place to support, but we don't have any directional control over locations and positions, but we do have strong engagement back in with the Home Office should we need to provide any support to anyone coming in through a refugee scheme.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Tim, do you have another follow-up?
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, I was going to also ask what Lawrence beat me to about the Rise Again situation. That's been explained by Maurice now. But no, thank you very much, Maurice, for highlighting the importance of the voluntary sector in the Afghan research. There's no doubts on that. That needs to be acknowledged and recognised by everybody, really. I just wondered, you're highlighting the Afghan refugees. They're now dispersed in the community and sort of looking after themselves as much as they can be, sort of thing. What's the situation on the Ukrainian refugees?
Well, I think you'll find that somewhere deep within the IP, it will tell us exactly how much we're spending on different groups, particularly because the Ukrainian situation is slightly different in that the people who have been living out in people's homes, some people still continue to do so, but the grants have effectively run out. I'll come to Alex in a moment to confirm that. Others are trying to find their own places to stay. Some are coming back. Are going back rather than some are coming over. I think that obviously we all kind of knew it wasn't going to be over in a year or so, and it's now been 3 years. But that does cause pressures, but less on us as a county and more, I think, on them trying to find somewhere to live. What's the latest, Alex, with the Ukrainians? I know the numbers are in there because I've seen them, but what is our responsibility in the amount that we need to sort of spend on making sure that communities where they are gathered are safer? And looked after, because I do worry that some of them go onto the homeless list as a consequence of no longer being in someone's house, etc.
So I think, Councillor Williams, if I can, just following on, obviously there is variation within the schemes and there's quite sort of emotive language within the place here. But what we have normally with the Ukrainian schemes are that, as Councillor Bright said, there are a number of people that are supported by families locally, but obviously wanting to return to Ukraine, and there are varying circumstances around their communities back in Ukraine that those who can return. One of the relationships we have is with our district council colleagues, because obviously they're lead for housing responsibility. What might be more detailed for you, Councillor Williams, if I could follow that up in writing, and I'll give you the latest breakdown of numbers, the support and what that relationship that we've got is. And if it's helpful, I'll do it across the breadth of our strategic migration partnership, because I think it will show you the work that we do right back to Hong Kong and other areas, providing support for those that come into the country. And as I said, there isn't a one sort of simple line for each family or person that comes in, because there are differing statuses and what applications may or may not be made. So if I can share, I'll follow up in writing to give you the exact numbers.
Yes, please. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, moving on to any other questions.
Hello, sorry about that. My technical issue.
That's totally fine.
On Project Insights, kind of a two-parter really. So what are the implications and challenges for the additional funding going to the fire station refurbishment, and how do these compare to other projects we have going on currently or coming up?
Well, thank you for that, Chris. I think colleagues will know, because you've heard me bang on about it enough times in council and other places, particularly the Public Health Community Safety Panel, how important it is, I felt, that we spend money refurbishing buildings that were built in the 1950s to house strapping 6'3" men to go out and put fires out. And now 50, 60 years later, when we have the appropriate cohorts of women and other communities joining, that those facilities are just not fit for purpose. And you've got to allow, particularly when people come out of fires and road traffic collisions and all sorts of messy stuff that we really don't want to deal with, but they do because they're very brave. And they've got to have places where they can feel that they can rest and they can just level out again, rather than staying overnight in places that are uncomfortable. So I'm pleased that we've been able to find the additional funding to support the revenue pressures which accompany fire station refurbishment work. And that proves, as I said, our commitment to make our fire stations more inclusive, more dignified, and a safer work environment. By introducing adaptations to better manage the risk, for example, of contaminants. You would have heard me talk about that before. People coming in from fires, they've got contaminants on their suits. They walk into a place, walk through offices, and then they go and get changed. You can't have that, because then the people in the offices over a period of time will be picking up those contaminants, and that's really important as well. And we brought those into fire stations. And this funding means things like the costs of bringing in porta cabins and skips and changes to electrical such as CCTV. These revenue costs can now be funded without having to dip into existing budgets, which are in place to actually support more routine maintenance and the upkeep of the fire estate. It's also important to recognise that in delivering the refurbishment programmes, that our fire stations have to remain open 24 hours a day while that work is ongoing. And that means an added pressure is generated to fund that support to allow the people to be there in other sections while they're working and can't close the buildings. In respect of other projects that was referred to in the question, yes. With the Longfield site, the redevelopment of our firefighter training facilities, that starts this year. The new building, those of you who've been there will know it's lots of well-organised porta cabins, and it's expected to result in fewer of these costs, which are looking more at new build rather than refurbishments. We're looking at a state-of-the-art live fire training facility, not just for our people, but to be an exemplar so that other authorities can come and use it, rent it from us as well, so it can generate some revenue for us as well. And other capital projects, such as vehicle replacement schemes or the replacement of risk critical equipment, such as cutting gear, are not subject to the same revenue pressures. So we are, as I said to you before, a smallish budget in compared to the whole of Hertfordshire County Council, £1 billion a year business. Public health and community safety is about 100 million of that, but it's not really 10% because the government gave us a grant of around 50 million for public health. So it's very small the amount that we contribute, but we have to make sure that we use it wisely. And I believe our officers have been doing just that, have taken the challenges seriously, but not sacrificing in any way, shape or form the safety of either our firefighters, our services, or any of our residents.
Thank you for that. Do you have anything to add, Sarah?
It wouldn't be for me because I don't lead on the fire service. It would be for Alex as Chief Fire Officer.
Great.
If there's anything, it may well be if there's any supplementaries, Chair, that you may want me to pick up on, but I think Councillor Bright has covered the main context of the question.
Great, thank you. Do we have any follow-up? Great, okay. Any other questions?
Are there other people with set questions, Tina?
I think we have covered a lot of the topics of discussion, but we do have plenty of time if there is anything else to do with this portfolio.
Well, I was just wondering, we don't seem to hear very much these days, Maurice, about the raids on the illegal traders. Can you give us an update on that?
Yes, interesting. Trading standards, which I've always said that the unsung heroes, because I always worry that when it comes to funding, we look generally at reducing funding around areas such as trading standards. All areas do it. And a very interesting article actually in this month's Which magazine about trading standards and how it varies across authorities across the country. One of the reasons you don't hear as much is because many of the situations are go to court, you see. And so when we have a success in court, we do put out press releases and stuff does go out to members with all the other papers. And if Alex makes a note of it, perhaps he can just get some backdated ones recently that I've seen to go to all members. So there's obviously that gap between people being raided, arrested and going to court. And you know how long that can take. And it has taken a long time, but we have successes. And maybe it's just worth Alex sending out again to members, to all members, where we have in the last 6 months, we've had one or two, I think maybe even national news. There's been particularly for the older people who've been ripped off by sort of roofing merchants and so on. Alex, we've got some really good ones, haven't we? Andy Butler keeps them all towards, doesn't he?
Absolutely, Councillor Bright. Yes, and I think, Councillor Miles, if I can, it's any opportunity to promote the work of our trading standards colleagues and what they do across the breadth of their responsibilities. There are regular operations that we undertake with police colleagues at time on targeting venues that are selling incorrectly, illegally, inappropriately vapes. You'll be aware there's the new Vapes and Tobacco Bill, which has been launched recently that our team are working on. So the other point I often talk about with things like vape as well, it links across to our challenge with the fire service, the continued issues that we have with lithium-ion batteries. And some colleagues will be aware of the fires that we get linked to them. So this is a continued challenge, an evolving market that is developed over the last few years, but we are responding as a sector, both from the enforcement and regulation side and the response from the fire service side around the impact that that's having. But as Councillor Bright has said, what I'll do, Councillor Bright, is share a note that gives you an update of all the operations that we undertake, the outcomes, any of those that have been through judicial process, we'll give you updates on. Others will let you know where they are in the phasing and the stages. But it is something that the Trading Standards team is a priority programme for them, and we've regular operations that we target venues.
When you're going around markets to look for fake designer gear and that sort of stuff?
So the wider, the IP, Copyright and Patents Act offences work is still ongoing. There is a constant balance that trading standards have, and some of that work where we work with partner agencies as well. Like any directorate, we will prioritise dependent on needs, but yes, we have a broad spectrum, and I'll keep that as part of the update as well so that you can see the wider operations that we are doing.
And it does, and it's a very good question, it does tend to focus on cigarettes because of that's duty, but also because you don't know what's being put in them, or the vapes that people are selling, chemicals. There have been all sorts of issues, as you know, with people inhaling stuff that's obviously very bad for them because they're not being monitored. And that can include vapes that are being sold in high street shops. And it's very important that our residents, as well as councillors, can act as the eyes and ears, where we've had one or two councillors, I won't say who they were, what area, because in the public, but reported a concern in their high streets. Our people went, had a look, and then raided the place because some of them are hiding in plain sight. And what was interesting was that when we raid, we take the stuff away, and then we go down the court route. In Suffolk, they give them a warning, and then they go away, and so they leave all the stuff in the shop, which doesn't, which is absolutely. I couldn't believe it when I. Could not believe it. I mean, it doesn't disrupt the flow at all, or business at all. So actually, and I've got pictures of me out on a raid, you know, very, very like the Sweeney. And it's really very important stuff. So again, as I said, residents or county councillors have a concern about their high street or shop they've been alerted to. They can privately email Andy Butler or Alex Woodman, and our officers will privately look into it. They won't give anyone's names out. And that's how we can help this, because, as I said before, you can get a vape easier than you can get a postage stamp in a high street now. And sadly, some of them are very bad for you. Alex?
Alex, that's fine.
Chair, if I may, again, just Councillor Brass, just the opportunity really just to promote what's taking place. One of the real focus areas for colleagues in trading standards and quite specialist work is the scan work that's been ongoing. And it is a real demand, particularly online. We've got a number of complex cases that we're leading on in the hundreds of thousands of pounds where vulnerable residents have been targeted. bank accounts emptied. So there's a one case that we've been focused on for the last probably 2.5 years now. That is a really difficult case that the team have been leading on. That is due to go to court very soon. And as I said, notwithstanding any judicial process, I think what we do like to highlight is the work of this. I think scams doesn't do it justice with the word. This is really complex fraud targeting some of our most vulnerable people. And that's something that the teams are actively focused on. And we have a number of live inquiries, investigations ongoing, and it's something as a priority we'll always keep.
Thank you. Right, so last 5 minutes, do we have any other questions?
Is it appropriate, Chair, for me just to mention, I think the allergy work that Trading Standards does, we've talked about some of the work, but the allergy work that Trading Standards do, keeping our public safe, well, and alive sometimes, because it's life-threatening allergies at times, is also something that should be commended and just reminded to members.
I think that's really important. There have been cases in schools, so yeah, an update on that would be great.
Chair, thank you. Notwithstanding the ask of wider scrutiny, but it may be an opportune moment if I could encapsulate perhaps for all colleagues a sort of a brief on what the live work the Trading Standards colleagues are doing, the breadth and reach of what they do, and the priority things and programmes that we're focusing on, because perhaps if I may, is there any opportunity to promote the work of our Trading Standards colleagues and what they're doing, if I could share that across this scrutiny panel, and obviously if there are any follow-ups or anything that we can do, I'm more than happy to arrange a session with Andy Butler and I and the team so that you can see the work of what's taking place.
Please do. Thank you.
And Tina, I'm quite keen to know if monies are recovered, does it come into our budget or we hand it over to the government? I've always argued about this.
Go on, Alex, because I start swearing otherwise on this answer. I know the answer to this.
I'm always nervous trying to justify POCA in front of a judge, but I will give it my best. Yes is the answer to elements of it. There is some quite time frameworks about the Proceeds of Crime Act. We have specialist officers that lead on that, and the aim and attempt of every one of our operations is that the first and primary thing that we do, if we seize any money, we will give that back to the victims. We would always want to see that money go to those that have lost. But in the offences and incidents where there is no immediate victim and we do seize asset or goods, then we would always look to secure that, and that money would go back into targeted operations. But again,
how much does the government get?
It varies depending on the circumstances. But what I'll do is, if I can give you a breakdown of the last couple of years, and I'll show you what we do, the monies that we secure. But as I said, the nature of the work, and when we've sort of led on POCA offences, what we would always look to do is to try and secure that money for the victims first before we take it back into the public person, but they get as much recovered as they possibly can. But I'll provide a breakdown. I don't have the figures to hand, forgive me, but I'll provide a breakdown of POCA activity that we've taken place over the last few years so that you can see the actions that are being undertaken.
Thank you.
Because I assume that we spend more than we get in, and therefore the service costs Hertfordshire residents as a consequence of people's crimes, basically. And I think what Lawrence would like to have known, and what I kind of do know, is do we get it all so we can then pay these officers to do the work to carry it on, or does government get some? And I suspect exactly. And from what I understand, we don't cover our costs on this.
We're not cost neutral when it comes to that activity. So no, we're not.
And so it costs, and so basically these crimes, yes, they cost people. They cost people health, they cost people money, but they also cost all residents as well as a consequence of other people's behaviour. And that's what I think Lawrence wanted to know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we're ready to wrap up. So I just want to thank Sarah, Alex, their teams, and then Maurice and Rena as well. And the members of this scrutiny will be back at 11:50 for recommendations. So if members of the Public Health IP scrutiny could be back at 11:50, that would be brilliant. Thank you.
Can I just clarify? I'm in a meeting now. I'm actually not. I'm somewhere else, but I'm in a meeting from 10:30 till 12:30. Am I needed at that meeting at 11:50?
I think it's fine for you to not be there, Maurice.
Thanks, because it wasn't in my diary. I'm actually at Elstree Studios for a board meeting. And so I've come in early for this meeting. I didn't want to be late. Thank you very much. And thank you, Tina. It was really good. Very interesting.
You will obviously have the ability to feed into the bits around the recommendations when it comes to overview and scrutiny in February.
Thank you.
Whereas officers and exec members are not expected to attend.
Thank you, Richard. I can't see your face, but I can hear your ethereal voice, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, those sessions are for members of the individual panels only, in my opinion.
Give me another couple of years, I might get the hang of it. Thank you, Richard. Thank you.
David here. Thanks, David here. Thanks, everybody. Well done. My thanks to the members. My thanks to officers. And as Tina says, see you all at 11:50. Thank you.
Chairman, we're live.
Thank you very much. And we'll start with our first question, and that's from John Hale. If those of you on the scrutiny panel to keep your cameras on, that would be great. And also the people answering the questions as well, please. Okay, yes, John Hale.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. The IP, Eric, the IP outlines a renegotiation of organic waste contracts associated with a saving of 3.734 million per year. With this saving in mind, is there a risk that these new contracts do not meet the same level of service as was previously the case? And what protections have we got in place to ensure this does not happen?
No, I firmly believe that the same level, if not better, level of service will be achieved. It's actually really good work by the team. These are replacement contracts rather than renegotiations, and these are for the organic waste curbside services for districts and boroughs. They do actually take into account capacity needed for councils that are not yet providing separate food waste and green garden waste collection. So that's looking ahead to the new legislation coming in. The new contracts are actually a very low service risk for us because they're using existing facilities which have been reliably operating for some years and all are within or close to Hertfordshire. And the savings are dependent on waste volumes, which can vary seasonably, but previously there were capital investments built into the contract cost. So the savings actually reflect the new tendered rates without having to reinvest again. So the new treatment costs reflect just operational treatment and final distribution costs. Food waste is treated through anaerobic digestion with energy production as the output, and there is sale of electricity by the facility operator, and this offsets the cost of the operation, and that's also reflected in the contract agreement, and that's at a time when wholesale electricity prices are relatively high. There will be key performance indicators such as turnaround times and the ability to accept waste, which will be closely monitored by the Waste Management Unit, and the availability of a number of facilities within or close to Hertfordshire does provide us contingency during unforeseen events. Can I just say Graham McAndrew was trying to get onto the call, so I don't know if he's succeeded yet. But anyway, that's my response. Happy to take a supplementary or if the officers have any operational responses.
I've got a couple of supplementaries, Eric. You mentioned in your response then that the previous contracts allowed for capital investment, but these current ones don't. How will any future capital investment be picked up, covered?
I think if Matt's here, he can probably answer that because he was involved in the contract negotiations. But I think this gives us capacity for the term of the contract. Do you want to just comment on that, Matt?
Happy to, and good morning, everybody. Yeah, so the previous capital investment was required because there were no facilities that were available for us to use. At the time, they were 15 to 20 year design, build and operate contracts that required the supplier to get planning permission, build out a facility and then operate it over an extended period of time. What we've seen since that time is that further investment is coming from private suppliers and provision of AD in the south and the north of the county, but also the contracts that we provided underpin construction of facilities. So as Eric has pointed out, those construction contracts where we actually had the capital repayments reflected in a higher gate fee. Now those contracts are ending or coming to an end. We can switch to facilities that are already built out and already operating. We don't have that capital payback element to the gate fees that we pay. And just to repeat what Eric has said, particularly in anaerobic digestion, the outputs are energy based in many different forms, and so the operators are allowed to give us a substantial discount on the gate fees that we would pay because they get income for the electricity that they sell back to the national grid.
Is that gate fee flexed according to the amount of they're getting back from the electricity? Do they bear the risk of the electricity price going up and down, or do we share in that risk?
Very good question. Something that we considered at length before we went to market. So we have got 5-year contracts in place specific for the anaerobic digestion plants, and they are at a fixed rate. Inflation will apply, negative inflation in this sense. So you could see whatever rate you get at the moment being reduced slightly. But it's fixed for the 5 years. Effectively, the suppliers have hedged, and on their basis they're able to provide us with a very good rate for a 5-year period. We do have a 5-year extension then built in after that period, but that would be subject to negotiation at the time. The price may change.
Okay, and Eric mentioned that the contracts allow for growth in the amount of waste. I hate to say that, afraid, but increase in the amount of waste being processed because more councils come on board. Is that is that coming at a cost to us, or is that just something that's in the contract that we can call on if we need to?
Hopefully, John, it will be beneficial. So what we will see as part of the waste reforms that are coming through is all households, including flats, being provided with, in this case, a separate food waste collection service. The latest date for implementation of that is the 31st of March 2026. And we'll see non-household premises by 31st of March this year, 2025. So hopefully what we will see is a better, more increased separation of food waste material, which will go into these lower gate fee facilities, and our highest gate fees that we pay for the residual, the non-recyclable waste. Hopefully we'll see a benefit from that.
Okay. Thank you, Jonathan. I don't have any more questions.
That's fine, thank you. Unless anybody has any other questions on the waste contracts, we'll move on to our second question from Paul DeCourt.
Thank you. 4 of our recycling centres are currently open 7 days a week, and the proposal is to reduce the opening times to 5 days a week. Are these proposed recycle centre operational efficiency targets feasible? Will it reduce recycling rates? And will the booking system be absolutely necessary to achieve that?
Okay, thanks very much for the question, John. There are 2 parts to this, so I'll go through them both. They're distinct things, but they work very well together. For some context, the draft budget was worked over several months in the light of continuing, as you know, increasing social care demand and costs. So every department needs to look at ways of operating as efficiently as possible. In response to the question, one answer is coverage. We have an outstanding recycling service that is available 7 days a week and will continue to do so because of proximity and phasing of opening times. So we have 16 recycling centres currently, 12 open 5 days a week, 4 open 7 days. Every recycling centre has one or often more 15 to 20 minutes travel distance from it. So the coverage is impressive, and every resident has a choice. All are open at weekends, and the 5 days are staggered. So, for example, Turnford is closed Thursday and Friday, and Hoddesdon Tuesday and Wednesday. So residents in Broxbourne are less than 10 minutes from either of them 7 days a week. Residents in Watford are 15 to 20 minutes from 4 recycling centres, and there are 5 centres between 14 and 19 minutes from Waterdale. So availability across locations will ensure that there will be 7 days a week access, and the booking system, possibly with an app, will find the most convenient time and location for residents. So whether urban or rural locations, and I've looked into this really carefully, anywhere in the county, there will be multiple proximate options for any day of the week. I'll just go on to the benefits of the booking system now, because that was part of the question. So obviously it manages peaks and troughs through time slots. It's easy to use. Reducing queuing means less waiting with engines idling or wasted journeys. Protecting staff and users. Staff have more time to check or challenge material that should not be entering the centres. More time to advise users and reduce contamination and prevent health risks to staff and residents from unsuitable materials or contaminated in containers. Recently, a member of staff was seriously assaulted by a customer. Over and above cameras, we need to know who's coming into our centres for the protection of staff and other users, and also to help smooth out the peaks and troughs. And this in turn provides logistical benefits in staffing and transport and emissions. It's also about increasing recycling rates. And I've just had a mail shot from somebody as we were talking about this. One system service provider reports that across our community of county councils, we've seen recycling rates rise by about 7%. So with more recycling and less waste reported as a result. Actually, our 7-day sites are the most expensive to run and have higher average waste throughput than the 5-day centres. And finally, going 5 days to the 4 centres allows us to reduce agency work by redeploying our permanent staff. And it also, another important thing, more effective control on the county's cross-border policy and trade abuse. Finally, something that came from DEFRA. In 2022, they examined whether there was a link between the introduction of booking systems at recycling centres and an increase in fly tipping. And the report said, we've found no academic literature or reports that provide evidence of a link between fly tipping and booking systems. It appears a lot of media coverage has been generated focusing on the feelings or instinct of some local politicians and members of the public about a linkage, sometimes because of a rise in fly tipping or fear of the rise rather than evidence of a link. Very finally, as part of due process, a full equalities impact assessment would accompany any recommendations presented for the public consultation, which would include physical and technological accessibility requirements. So I've tried to give as full an answer as possible there, but I'm sure there'll be supplementaries which Matt and the team can help with.
I'm sure there will be. Paul?
Yes, thank you. Firstly, just a comment as you made about the perception about fly tipping and booking systems. I have total sympathy with that, and I agree with you. I had exactly the same issue when our district introduced garden waste charges. It was asserted by a whole range of local politicians this would lead to a massive increase in fly tipping, and it didn't at all. And I never expected it to either. So totally take that point on board, and it's a well-made point. I've got 2 questions. I mean, one's probably more for you, Eric, and one might be just more broadly is, given all the comments you've made, why was this not done before for those 4 sites? So, for example, my local site in Harpenden has had 5-day operation for really quite a long time.
Yeah, I guess that would come up. I think it's really a question of how members and residents would feel about it. And that's what I'm trying to address now. So when there isn't an absolute need to do something, then I think people are reluctant to make changes. But we've actually been considering this for 2 or 3 years. And we've had discussions at panel about what are the merits of doing things in different ways. It's just about progress. And I think regardless of where we are in the administration, if something is the right thing to do, then let's do it. You know, I know that we've got members who've already challenged some of this, but actually, if it's the right thing to do, if it's in the long-term interest, then let's go ahead and try it.
Paul, what was your other question?
Yes, it's just trying to understand a little bit more. I mean, you mentioned the horrible story about the serious assault and needing to be able to track which vehicles were coming onto the site, of which you know, I would support trying to protect staff in any way you can. I wasn't really quite sure how that was relevant to this, though, in that we're not asking everybody at every site to book in, and therefore we identify them. So I just something for me to try and understand.
I think it would be useful. I'll let Matt come in, but my feeling about this is actually we do need some. We've got policies around residents only. We've got reciprocal arrangements with 2 local authorities, so that helps where residents are coming and going between the 2 across county. But it's very difficult to have a member of staff completely dedicated to checking who's coming in. And also, because of the peaks and troughs, as I mentioned, you might have a lot of people coming in all at one go. So having a booking system that allows this to be smoothed out actually gives staff a lot more time to actually check whether there's any contamination, to advise people. And I suspect that the resident or the user who did the assault was probably trying to do something that you wouldn't normally expect in a household waste recycling centre. They may not have even come from within the county. So I think it's really important for us to actually know who's coming in. And it's a kind of warning as well. If people think, well, okay, they know I'm going in there, I need to actually make sure I do things in the right way. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Matt.
Yes, of course I can. Thank you. I think the idea, and we're seeing these systems increasingly commonplace across the country and the region. The idea is that effectively some are reporting that the lack of anonymity, when you've got someone's details, then that low-level daily abuse which does occur is significantly improved. I mean, Eric is referencing a particularly violent assault, and we have had those previously. We will do all we can to take action, appropriate action against any perpetrators, and the police in this case did make an arrest quickly. But that's about access and information and knowing who's coming onto your centres. The systems themselves are very intuitive and very easy to book. So subject to consultation, having a booking system in place would really help us with those peaks and troughs. If you can imagine a typical 8-hour day, perhaps less than half of that, 3 to 4 hours, are the genuine peaks during a daily use of a recycling centre, and of course the weekends and bank holidays. So flattening that curve, if you like, then enables the staff to have much more effective controls on what's coming in through the gate. A technological solution rather than an ID check on the gate for cross-border waste checking, and the controls on that non-household waste are what all local authorities that have implemented these systems are reporting as positive benefits.
How, though, do you save money by doing this? Because if you don't have a smartphone, or you're not the sort of person that would go online, presumably you would make a telephone call, and you would have to employ somebody in order to do that booking. So how does it save money?
So, as Eric mentioned, post the consultation, whenever any recommendations are put forward, there'll be full equalities impact in terms of accessibility, as well as some sustainability measures considered as part of any recommendation. There is a definitive link in all cases that I know of in terms of that demand management measure. So whether it's a booking system or whether it's a reduction in days or operational hours, greater controls on waste that should not be coming into the centre is first and foremost what's being targeted. You also see resident behaviour change. So instead of very frequent use of a recycling centre, people book a slot on the day when they want to, but they could also, what we're finding is that people take greater quantities of material in fewer visits. So they plan their visits better than they would do when there's unfettered free access constantly.
If you live on the borders of Hertfordshire and Cambridgeshire, and I don't think Cambridgeshire has a booking system, wouldn't people more likely go to their recycling dump, and therefore our recycling rate would reduce?
I think they already have to book with us, don't they, Matt? Well,
we currently have an access agreement with Cambridgeshire where we police it through a combination of the ANPR and manual checks on site. So residents from Cambridgeshire have to apply for a permit currently.
That was it, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the way we currently police that. But it is resource intensive. A booking system would give you the definitive data far quicker and easier than the current system we have in place.
It says in the proposal there could be, this is after the bit about the 7 days and 5 days, there could be alternative ways to deliver the same level of financial efficiency as targeted, and these will form part of a comprehensive public consultation process prior to decision making. So what are the alternative ways to deliver the same level of efficiencies?
I'm happy to answer that. I'm also conscious of time. In summary, the legislation pertaining to provision of our network is quite grey. You have to have it open at least part of a weekend, and you have to have sites plural. So we currently have 16 centres, as Eric outlined. So changing the numbers of sites, more drastic changes to days of operation, hours of operation, charging for certain material types. There are a range of other options that will be explored in a comprehensive consultation, so that we can understand the best position to put forward. Officers have worked to try and present some options that meet the savings targets, in terms of the reduction from 4 days to from 7 to 5 days on the 4 sites, and also a booking system. But they would still lead to improved operational, financial and environmental outcomes. So that's what's included in the IP at the moment, and the consultation will run later this year.
Can I just add something, Jonathan?
Briefly, yes.
A large number of residents in East Herts already use a booking system because we have reciprocal arrangements with Essex who have that system in place. So we know how well that works already.
Okay, thank you. Let's go on to the next question now. Dee Hart.
Thank
Dee,
you,
are you
Chairman.
there?
Yeah, good morning. Eric, my question is, the IP highlights the ongoing recruitment and retention issues across all service areas. Considering the unique environmental makeup of Hertfordshire, being a mixture of dense metropolitan and green areas, is a £300,000 flooding investment enough to ensure there is sufficient expertise in the long term?
Okay, thanks, Dee. So the IP relates to the lead local flood authority as a whole, and there are 2 separate teams to deliver flood risk management. So the flood risk management investigations, these are projects and schemes implemented across the county, and they're doing an amazing job, and I work quite closely, or very closely, with the team. Then there's the SUDS team who comment on development applications and deliver duties regarding ordinary watercourse network. Both teams have statutory responsibilities, and this includes Section 19 investigations, maintaining an asset register, and as a statutory consultee for major planning applications, and also providing advice to local planning authorities where flood risk might be mitigated through improvements, for example, delivered in development schemes. So the £300,000 will enable the recruitment of 2 full-time officer equivalents within the flood risk management team, which addresses the current shortfall in technical staff. And the remaining funds will be used to build capacity within the SUDS team and reduce reliance on the current contract with external consultants, which is with WSP, currently providing the responses to major planning applications. So it is part of a longer term plan to grow the team further by 3 full-time equivalents by reducing spend on consultants as the team's skill and knowledge base is developed. This IP enables us to return to an in-house structure over time while continuing to fulfill the statutory duties. The timetabling is designed to develop the team for the long term and retain flexibility through consultants for the time being to manage peaks and troughs in activity. There are aspects of the Flood and Water Management Act that are yet to be enacted. We're still waiting for details. Schedule 3 will require the County Council to establish a SUDS approval body, and this would need to be a service in its own right and subject to the potential for new duties funding as a startup and then from development. So that's that. If there are any operational questions, then I'll probably bring in Lynn, but
okay. Dee?
Okay, yeah. Going on from that, the £300,000 for flooding investment to improve flood protection and investigations, and to ensure planning applications to reduce flood risk in the future. Hertfordshire may require more expertise to meet the unique challenges associated with its geography. If this expertise cannot be acquired, there is a risk with the key priority of reducing risk of flooding in or from the new development is not achieved. How would you consider in tackling this going forward?
So is this a question around ability to recruit, Dee? Is that really what you're saying?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Keep your answer brief, if you could.
Yes, Lynn coming in on that.
Yeah, happy to. It's an emerging market, Councillor Hart, and there's an increasing need for flood risk specialists right across the UK. So the approach that we're taking here is we keep our external suppliers in place so that we can use them as we need and their expertise, but also we're growing our own. So what you're seeing here in terms of the step-by-step recruitment and building over time gives us time to bed in new people, grow our own, and hopefully keep them through the measures that we take around good working environment, interesting caseload, and great working conditions. But we are in competition with the private sector and with other local authorities, no question. But I think that's being recognised in the training and academia circles. And hopefully more people are going to come through the pipeline, pardon the pun, so that we've got more to select from. But we are, rest assured, we're comfortable with the number of people that we're adding this year. It's within our capability to bring those people on and get them up to speed this year, whilst preparing to take more on next year. And we still have the bedrock of consultancy outside that we can draw on as we need to.
Let's move on to question 4 now. We might get a very short answer.
Jonathan,
Yes.
I've accessed it now, so I can ask the question myself. Thank you. Morning, Eric. The Sustainable Hertfordshire Central Fund sets out a £10 million capital funding to support sustainability infrastructure projects in line with this authority's Sustainable Action Plan. There is currently just under £2.9 million uncommitted. How can we ensure the fund is effectively and efficiently working towards meeting the plan's targets in the plan?
Thank you. Yeah, it's a really robust process, and we've got evidence of how it's been used to date. So it's funded a diverse range of projects. All bids are prepared in consultation with service area reps, Sustainable Hertfordshire officers and finance prior to presentation to a Sustainable Hertfordshire board. All financially sound bids are presented to the board. All bids are discussed and must demonstrate how they will deliver against the Sustainable Hertfordshire ambitions, and all bids are then presented. This is where I and others come in. They're then presented to the exec members for the environment and resources, and the final decision to support is sought from us and the Section 151 officer. And then all successful bid projects are regularly monitored by the Sustainable Hertfordshire Board. So there are some projects that have come to us with recommendations, which actually, by the time it got to us, we've actually thought that probably doesn't quite make the mark or fit the bill, and it hasn't gone through. And there are some that then are re-looked at.
Well, Jonathan, I'm conscious that we've run out of time, and therefore I'm not entirely sure that I'm absolutely satisfied with that answer as giving me the security I was seeking. But I've raised it, and I'm sure that the team will ensure that money is properly applied. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Those of us who are on the scrutiny panel, we've got a separate meeting in a few minutes' time on Teams. It's sort of breakout group that we'll have a little bit of a chat, and we can perhaps, possibly raise that, Richard. And otherwise, we're getting together at 10 to 12 with all the other morning groups. But thank you very much. Yeah, sorry.
Sadly, I'm a team member on the next one on
okay,
highway, so I'll have to miss that one. But I will be around at 11:50 to look at the recommendations with you.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you to all of those who took part, and Eric and officers, much appreciated. Thank you, and bye-bye for now.
Yeah, thank you.
we can get everybody on the panel to put their cameras on. Might be useful.
That's a very good idea. Yes, please. Thank you, Jeff.
There's
So I can see your ugly faces.
Chair, we're now live.
Well, good morning to this next section of the budget scrutiny. And we're looking at highways and transport. And those of us who have read the public survey, which is conducted as part of the budget setting process, will have noticed that for residents of Hertfordshire, highways, potholes, road maintenance, pavements is the single most important issue for them. And we've also been in the national news with the suggestion that we have the toughest criteria for fixing, or rather not fixing, potholes. So no pressure on Adam, who is the deputy portfolio holder for highways, and Tony Boucher, who is the head of service. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Steve Jarvis to introduce the first line of questioning. Steve.
Thanks very much, Sandy. And the revenue budget for highways maintenance is not planned to increase either this year or across the IP period. And in addition, although there is some extra capital funding for highways maintenance this year, that appears to be a one-year increase. Presumably, we expect there to be an increase in costs. Providers will be paying additional lash insurance, and there'll be some increase in material costs, presumably. So does that mean that we're looking at a reduction in the amount of routine maintenance that's done from the revenue budget immediately, and a reduction in the amount of capital maintenance in future years?
So I think you're right to say that, this is the largest sort of allocation that we've had for many years, but most of that is on the capital side. And the revenue, has been more constrained. I think that's fair to say. I think that part of that is the reason for the council sort of balancing its budget between other departments where demand is also increasing very quickly. And you're absolutely right to say that national insurance employers, it has gone up, and that will affect costs. So I think yes is the answer to that. But I think because of the way we are prioritising our maintenance, I think we can still do a really very good job under the circumstances. So, we've been investing revenue in recent years through the enhanced maintenance programme, which is £2 million every year. And I think that stands us in good stead, really, going forward. I can't tell you what future years funding will be because that'll come from government. But I can imagine that it's going to be constrained, going forward as it has been in recent years.
I mean, it seems likely that funding will continue to be constrained, and I understand the argument that by putting additional money in on a one-off basis, you can maybe reduce future capital maintenance. I'd be interested to understand the extent to which you think that might happen. But in terms of the revenue-funded maintenance, which cleans gullies and cuts grass and repaints white lines, those are things that are going to continue to be necessary. Is there an attempt to look at ways in which we might do more of those for the same resources rather than just reduce the quantity as the cost goes up?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, Tony might want to jump in. I just want to mention a couple of points, though. As part of the extra capital, there's sort of like a £16 million allocation to various sort of drainage and weather-related issues that we might face. So that is actually that's laid out. So we've got £1 million for responding to problems caused by climate change, which is drainage. We've got a focus on A roads and another £1 million, and we've got a £5 million allocation to reacting to adverse weather. So I think what's happened is where we've had this extra capital, we've sort of managed to sort of swing in and backfill some of that reduction in revenue. So Tony, I don't know if you want to just pick up on a few more details.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Adam. I think it's worth reflecting on the £2 million enhanced maintenance that you mentioned earlier. That's an additional sum of money that's provided to highways each year since 2022-23, over and above our core budgets, and that's revenue funding. But Steve's quite right in his question that the revenue funding is flatlining in future. That means that if we if no extra money comes in, and assuming that the 2 million continues, that we'll do a little bit less of everything. We won't stop any whole service areas, Steve, or drastically cut back anything. It will be, we'll do a little bit less here and there.
Okay, I mean, I think yes, one of the concerns is that if you continue to do that indefinitely, you eventually get to the point where there's a significant reduction. And I guess the other issue in terms of that level of funding, and some of this clearly falls into the capital area as well, is that my understanding is that this year you have reduced the amount of work you do in terms of category 2 funding, but as other work has increased in cost. Do the plans reflect that as well?
Do you want me to cover that, Adam?
Yes, please, Tony.
Yes, certainly. So in capital funding next year, we'll get additional funding, which is outlined in the IP, and that will we're intending to use 4 or 5 million of that to add to the combined category 1 and category 2 budgets. So this year we paused that budget for the category 2 works, which are the less important works. Category 1 are the urgent and emergency works. We always do that. We always throttle the cat 2 works if there are cost increases in cat 1. So next year, intention is to use some of the 16 million to fund that category 1 / category 2 pot.
Okay. I guess just one final point is, there's been some publicity around trials that have done around innovation, AI pothole fixing tools and that kind of thing. Is there any funding to continue that, and indeed to kind of productionize it, to make it part of the normal operation?
Can I just say something and then maybe bring Tony in? I think essentially we're using the county as a test bed for some of these new technologies, and that isn't really costing us money in a sense. But we are going to benefit from these technologies that go on to be sort of implemented. Tony, did you want to add to that?
That's right, Adam. We've provided our expertise and the skills of the engineering teams to help with the development of the robotised product. We've also closed roads at our own cost to help them pilot things in the real world. So our involvement and our cost has been officer time and road closures, and we'll continue to do that because we want Hertfordshire to be a network that innovators can use. We've also got what we call a live labs test bed in Hatfield. We've got a range of equipment where we can test different technologies and different materials and so on.
Yeah, okay.
Steve, thank you very much. Do any colleagues want to come in with supplementaries? I see Jeff.
Yeah, if I could just briefly, you talked about 2 million extra for enhanced maintenance. Can you give an example of actually what enhanced maintenance, what would that include? Is that for sort of road overruns, that sort of stuff that is normally neglected?
Can I just quickly mention and then go to Tony again? So edge overruns is actually there's £1 million allocated to that in the extra £16 million capital.
Okay.
So that is a separate sort of line. But Tony, if you want to go on to ask the second part of the question of more detail about what that is.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Jeff. The enhanced maintenance is primarily to encourage more walking and cycling. So we use it to cut back vegetation and to improve signs and lines, road markings, and gully dig outs, so that there's less ponding around walking and cycling routes to schools, for example. So that's what we use most of the enhanced maintenance money for.
That's very clear. Thank you.
Well, if there are no more supplementaries on this, all I will say is that 6 words rang out to me in what Tony said: a little bit less of everything. And I mean, that's the sort of drumbeat of this budget process this year. And I think for a lot of people, that's a bit depressing, but we are where we are. We'll move on to the second question, which, given how much it has been raining over the last few days, seems exceedingly pertinent. So, Jeff, if you fire away.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sandy. Yeah, very pertinent at the moment. So my question really is about flooding. What is included in the budget to address the ever increasing problems of highway flooding, whether that's due to climate change or failure of the assets, and the impact that this has on residents businesses and the impact that it actually has on the highway network?
So thanks for the question, Jeff. What I'd say is there's actually £4 million of capital allocated for next year. £2 million of that is from the additional £16 million that I've mentioned a couple of times, I've referenced. £2 million is from the climate response funding. So that's separate to that. But that's on top of the cyclical gully cleaning as well. So I haven't got the revenue figures for that in front of me, but Tony, if you wanted to add a bit of detail to that element of it.
Unfortunately, I don't have the revenue figures in front of me either, Adam, but in a typical year, we attend to over 100,000 gullies as part of our regular cycle. And as you said, in addition to that, next year, there's 4 million of capital funding, which should make a significant difference. And in recent years, and we produced a panel paper on this last year, if members want to look at it, that goes through some of the benefits we've had from the additional funding, including huge numbers of blockages that we've managed to unblock.
So we should be seeing more gully cleaning then, really, in the cyclical programme, or specifically at flooding issues.
We wouldn't expect to do more of the cyclical programme because that's by definition sort of a routine cycle. What we'll use the capital funding for is when we've identified particular problems in an area where we can sort of improve the drainage systems. That's what we use the capital money for. Often it's not gullies that are the problem, it's the pipework underground that's broken.
Yeah, thank you.
I will come in, if I may, with Fiona, please fire away first.
Thank you so much. Just a very quick one. So I know that there's obviously the cyclical gully programmes, but if we do have particular drainage issues, then it's possible to get onto a quicker programme. Will this funding enable more of that?
We're going to continue. Sorry, Adam.
No, that's fine. You go ahead.
So we're going to continue with the same way of working as we do at the moment, Fiona. So we'll continue to investigate, and then we'll prioritise the funding accordingly to where we think it will make the most benefit.
And I think I was just in on the end of the last scrutiny where you were talking about officers for flooding, and if there's a strong enough complement of officers, and I think the answer was yes. There's going to be more taken on. So I think I just picked up on that on the last discussion.
Steve, you wanted to come in here.
Yes, I mean, I understand that a lot of the issues are not gullies, but pipes. But in terms of gullies, Tony, you mentioned the cyclical programme. Is the cyclical programme subject to a little bit less of everything that you mentioned earlier?
I don't think we'd adjust the cyclical programme. And remember that, as I said, there's a little bit less from the because we're not getting inflation, but we've still got 2 million more from enhanced maintenance, which is more than the cost of inflation. So overall, we get an additional 2 million. Inflation, we estimate, is going to be most 1.5 million, the inflation and national insurance estimate. So if we do need to do a little bit less here and there, I don't think it will affect the gully programme. It's more likely to be sort of discretionary works where we may not choose to cut back as much, for example, on vegetation.
I mean, I will just come in with one more supplementary, and Tony will know that I have some specific issues that I do continue to badger him about. But I think the real problem is where even when we keep the pipework clean and it's sound, and even where the gullies are cleaned out regularly, the systems are simply inadequate for the change in weather patterns. And it just seems to me that 2 million here, 4 million there will go nowhere if we actually have to do massive rebuilding of our drainage infrastructure. Just a quick comment, and then we'll move on to the next question.
Yes, the climate change is affecting everywhere, and you see it all the time in the news, with counties across the country suffering from flooded roads and highways. And the drainage systems in the highway network were designed for the water that falls on the highway, not for runoff from fields or from hard standings, and so on. So you're entirely right, Sandy, that the drainage system, even when it's running perfectly, may not be able to cope with the overwhelming rainfall that we're now receiving.
And on that note, I will move on to the third question, which is being asked by Fiona. So Fiona, over to you.
Thank you. With only a year of budget for rolling out 20-mile-an-hour zones, how many planned schemes across the county will remain unfunded or potentially remain unfunded?
Okay, thanks for the question, Fiona. I'm gonna give some details about that now. So at the beginning of the process, there was a starting list of 550 schemes that were ranked in order of seriousness. Okay. So from that, we identified a priority list of 57 scheme areas, which incorporated 191 of the original schemes, okay, to target the delivery programme on. Currently, there are 25 schemes in progress at various stages. 8 schemes have been completed to date, and 11 schemes, including one in my division, have not been progressed following consultation. So I think hopefully that answers your questions. But I think the important thing here is, I mean, my view on 20-mile-an-hour zones has changed over recent years. I started off being absolutely against them, and partly the reason for that was the one that was suggested in my area was over too broad an area. Okay, but I've actually changed to sort of yes, if I can have a smaller area where there's evidenced higher risk. So I haven't found any of those in my division at the moment, but I think the policy generally has moved towards smaller 20-mile-an-hour zones where there's particular areas of concern, for example, outside of schools, outside of maybe residential homes and that sort of thing. So hopefully those numbers and that way of thinking and the change of really how the policy has moved in the last couple of years should give you some way to an answer.
Thank you, Sandy. May I just ask a very quick supplementary?
Absolutely.
So that was the first scheme. Thank you, Adam, for that. That was the first scheme, but I know that we were moving into the investigation on the second phase. Okay. Has that been affected at all, and will it be affected at all?
I think I'll ask Tony to come in on this next bit, please.
So Adam, that's probably really my area.
Sorry, Rupert.
Yeah.
Rupert, you're being very broken up.
Yeah. I don't know why. I'm on Wi-Fi in Farnham or Robertson House. Is that working now?
You're better now.
You're better now.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry. Maybe it's overwhelmed by turning the camera on. I'm not sure. But in relation to where we are on the overall programme, there's 13 sites that we haven't yet undertaken surveys and data collection on, whilst we work through the consultation and engagement process for the sites where we have collected the data to understand whether or not there's appetite from those local communities and local members to proceed with the schemes where we've demonstrated the evidence or set out the measures that would be required to bring the areas into compliance with the 20-mile-an-hour area. Once we've got a good understanding of that, the view is then we will have an understanding of how much further down the list we can go. So if all of the schemes that we're currently got data for were to proceed, we won't be able to go any further through the list of sites. However, if there are some where either the works are more expensive or more extensive than we thought, or the local community aren't supportive of those measures, we would then revisit the list and work down to the next 1, 2 or 3 sites, depending on the scale of the changes and budget that's required.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Jeff, I see you're signalling.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Yeah, on the phase 2, Rupert, you mentioned phase 2 of the scheme. So you're saying that's actually started, is it? Because I didn't think it was underway. Because I remember some time back, I'm talking parochially here. There was a scheme they were going to be looking in the Bundyford area for 20-mile-an-hour, and I've had no notification of that. And I seem to remember I was first on the list in phase 2.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd call it phase 2, Jeff. What we've done is we've worked our way through the list. We've reached a point in the programme where we've paused data collection.
Okay.
it may be that you would choose to then determine the next batch when we restart data collection as phase 2, if that's what the phase 2 is pointing towards. But we've worked our way through the list, collected it to a point, recognised that if all of those schemes were to be delivered, there wouldn't be sufficient funding to go any further. So it would be an abortive cost to collect further data at this point in time. However, as Adam's pointed out already, there are sites that don't receive local support, and they don't receive support from their local member. So depending on how many of those there are in this current batch that we're working through to determine what the schemes look like, it could well be that we restart data collection to help us understand which sites are viable for progressing 20 miles an hour in the next lot.
Okay,
so I'm happy to, officers can go through with any member as to where their sites are on the list and explain where we are. 20 mile an hour team are more than happy to have a catch up with anybody that's got questions around specifics.
That would be useful. Thank you.
Steve, I may leave you, since you've had some good bites of the cherry. Asif has a supplementary, and then we need to move on to the next question after that. But Asif.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Steve, for giving me a position to come in. I'm just looking at with 20 miles per hour, it's the process it takes from start to finish. And is there any efficiencies that can be made within the particular process that actually makes the process quicker and more budgetary efficient?
Are you happy to answer that one, Adam?
If you go ahead, are you talking about sort of communicating between residents and members?
Communicating the survey process. When an idea first comes about, or when the initial surveys come that we want at 20 miles per hour, the whole process from start to finish is just bicentennially long. And is there an efficiency in that whole process that actually can make the process slightly quicker, and also reduce the budget it takes within that? Can AI be used in surveys and data analysis, all of those things?
Yeah, let's quick answer.
Rupert, could you answer that, Rupert? Is that okay?
So firstly, we have evolved our processes through the development of the 20 mile an hour programme. So what we do today is very different to what we did at the start, recognising some of the points you've made about it being slightly cumbersome and slow in terms of being able to move forward. We started grouping broader areas together so that we would engage and consult more holistically, and we would join neighbouring sites together to ensure that we were able to deliver them as one scheme rather than revisiting a similar area 2 or 3 times through the delivery stages. So I think we have become more efficient, and we are continuing to look at ways to be more efficient, one of which is utilising data that we've started to get around vehicle speeds and movements, and to calibrate that against observed speeds on sites that we've already tried, to be able to work with the police to explain to them that actually some of this digital data that we have is probably just as useful in the first instance to help us determine areas that are appropriate for 20s, rather than having to go out and collect our own data every time. So for the next batch, we're already looking at that and trying to determine the areas that are most likely to align in the first instance with minimal interventions, and those where we think interventions are likely and thus the schemes are going to be more costly. So we are doing exactly what you've suggested there to try to make the best use of data.
I think on that note, and thank you for that, given the time constraints, we'll move on to the final area of questioning, and I will ask Asif to pose the initial question.
Thank you, Sandy. So my question is actually on the, sometimes we have utility companies and the income that the council can derive from the violations within the New Roads and Streets Act. The company's taken longer to do their works. It's really annoying for residents and drivers. So what can we do? Is there anything in that budget that gives us confidence that we've got enough inspectors to get this enforced, and there is a slightly more income stream, number one, and number two, that these roadworks actually are done quickly and efficiently, and people can use the highways better?
So can I start that and then hand over to Tony? So I think there was a time when, as the council's been facing sort of difficult finances, that we weren't filling vacant positions, and I think perhaps enforcing officers might have been part of that. But actually, more recently, we're recruiting 2 new inspectors to bring the street work inspection service back up to full strength. That's what we can control. What we can't control is the number of surveys that my understanding is that we take, because that is a proportion of the works that have been done in previous years. So let's say I think I've got the figure 15% in my head. Tony will be able to confirm, but we can't increase the proportion of previous works that we then go and survey, inspect in that way. So that's the outline answer. It's the staff. We have got enough inspectors. We're up to full complement. Tony, if you'd like to add to that.
Yes, very briefly. We can charge utility companies for the sample Adam mentioned of inspections that we do, and that's set in legislation how much we can charge and for what proportion. The other source of income is if utility companies or anyone else opening the highway doesn't comply with the conditions of their permit, then we can issue a fixed penalty notice. So there are those sort of 2 sources of income, I see, what we charge them for the sample and then the FPNs.
Okay, and what is the income that we're getting? What's the projection from that particular thing going forward?
I don't have the figures in front of me. I might need to turn to finance colleagues to either respond now or subsequently, I'm afraid.
There was quite a substantial sum looked for in the budget, as I recall.
Yeah.
Okay. I haven't got that figure in front of me, so sorry.
I've got one question just to go on from this, which is you say that you are fully staffed now in the streetworks enforcement team, which is a tick. Where are we with staffing in the wider enforcement? Because nothing irritates members of the public more than seeing verges and pavements damaged and broken by developers, and we just don't seem to take action. So where are we in the staffing of that area?
Tony, can you pick that up, please?
Yes, we had to make some changes as part of the savings measures in the county council. Those posts remain vacant, and as a team, we're focusing very much on the safety aspects, Andy. So if there are safety aspects of enforcement, we're focusing on those. If there are things like overgrown vegetation, our contractors will regularly send letters to landowners telling them to cut back their vegetation. So that's continuing, but we're not at the moment intending to refill the vacant posts.
I mean, I have to say, and I think colleagues will join me, I find that very disappointing because I just get no end of communication from residents in decent residential streets who are just appalled at seeing their pavements smashed up, their verges churned up, just general damage from careless and sometimes deliberately careless developers, and they just see no sense that we are trying to protect the public asset, which after all belongs to them, and then which has to be replaced by us. So I really find that a very disappointing answer if we're not prepared to staff up properly the teams that can carry out this enforcement. I'm not sure there's an answer to that, but I mean,
I think, as Tony said, it's the prioritisation on safety with limited resources. That's the only answer I can give, really.
Any other questions? Indeed, any other questions? We have 2 more supplementaries, which possibly are too big to pile into.
Sorry, Sandy.
Well, I see we've got a bit of time, Sandy.
Yes, Richard.
I see we've got a bit of time, so why don't I just throw the tangible benefits? What tangible benefits will Herts bus users see from the extra BSIP funding? And a thumbnail response would be acceptable, I think.
Okay, I can give the very brief sort of bottom line, if you like, and that is that BSIP funding has shown that there has been a 3 million passenger increase from March 2023 to 2024, which is a 33% increase post-COVID. That's the takeaway, I think. I think there's still more to be done, but I think that is a positive move in the right direction and something that's tangible that can be quoted.
Okay,
I'm sure there's more than that. And if you've got a minute, if Rupert wants to do just
well,
a minute.
There is, Sandy.
So
I mean, at the risk of making you the only chairman that overran, I will rest my case on that. But however, I have put down a marker on that one. It was included in the key lines, of course, and so you will be aware of it. And I'm absolutely convinced that you will apply those funds properly. So, but the next iteration of this council will be holding you to a cord will account, won't they? I see Asif wants to come in.
Asif has got a quick question. Yes.
No, it's a very quick question about the cost of what does it cost to fix a pothole? Are the old road surfacing? I'm just looking. Are there any efficiencies going on? Is it still rising? It's a very quick, a minute answer if you don't mind.
I suppose that depends on the particular circumstances. I don't give a particular figure. Maybe Tony can give a sort of averaged figure.
No, just to repeat what you said, Adam, it depends on the road construction, the type of material, and how we were filling in the pothole, and of course the size of the hole that we're filling in.
No, it's just when the underlying our materials more expensive because there was an increase over just post COVID.
Actually, be quick. Actually, break off there. Yes.
Inflation has increased the prices of bitumen and asphalt over time.
And bear in mind the national insurance increase as well, which leads into higher expenses for materials.
On that note, I need to draw this slightly too short session. I hope next year we'll go back to having more time to ask about these things. But I want to thank Adam for stepping in for Phil Bibby and thank Tony and Rupert. And I'm sure these are matters which we will continue to explore. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chairman. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Voice for mission control here. Well done, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
So much for that. Just a reminder, see you back at 11:50 for the ruminations around the recommendations.
But
Thanks,
to
everyone.
my team, we're having a separate quick team meeting now, just to quickly look at what we've just heard. So
thank you very much.
People on this scrutiny, if you want to cut out now and join the other team invite, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're live, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for coming back on time. Sorry, we were a little bit tardy. We've been extra thorough with some thinking around the recommendations, and we're going to go through in the same order as we did before. So we're obviously starting with adult social care, health and wellbeing. Anthony, anything you'd like to say before I hand over to Tim?
Well, not at this point. I think that the process, I understand it, Tim and colleagues are going to present what they think are the recommendations that arise from discussion. We're going to have a look at them. I'd hope colleague on the group will comment, and then we'll try and conclude.
Good, excellent, and you get obviously a chance at the end. So without any further ado, I'll hand you over to Tim Parlow, head of Scrutiny. Tim.
Thanks, David, and thank you, members, for what I thought was an incredibly productive and actually very well run morning session that would manage to stay to time. So, in terms of what appear to be areas for emerging recommendations from adult care, health and wellbeing, I think I've broadly divided these into some reassurance around demographic pressures and the impact of demographic pressures, and ensuring that the proposals within the IP took account of that. The second one was around recruitment and retention, workforce pressures, and particularly members noted the impact of changes to national insurance for employers. And the third one really was around how the investment in capital programs, and also the reinvestment where savings are being proposed, how we best divert those into, or we ensure that those are diverted into frontline services. From where I was sitting, the answers that were given by the officers and the executive members appeared fairly comprehensive. And I confess I didn't get any burning issues where I felt that members were saying they were dissatisfied by the answers given, or that they had further areas that they wanted reassurance on. So I'd be grateful now if we could just spend the next few minutes just confirming that. And if you have got anything that you want me to build into recommendations, I can do so.
Hey, now that you've got it up, the slide up, I can't actually see all the faces and members of the group, but I've got Fiona.
I can drop that off the screen and type
well,
in the,
no, I
in
think
the
it's probably
background.
quite useful to have it up. Right, Fiona certainly won, and maybe I think someone else might have put their hand up. Fiona, and is that I don't want to
Yes.
misidentify. Colette first.
Yes.
Then Fiona. Then Alison.
Right. Thank you. Excuse me. I might be coughing. I'm suffering from something. First of all, Anthony, very briefly, I'd like to congratulate you on absolutely superbly chairing that meeting. I thought you handled it extremely well. Secondly, I thought the responses from the officers were very comprehensive. I don't really have anything much to add to that, and I know Chris is going to send further on. But at some point, I would like, in our response, to offer our congratulations to Chris and the Adult Care Service for a service which is nationally recognised for its innovation, its transformation, and value for money. And I think that does need to be said as part of this look at the IP process, which has been very thorough, as I would expect from that team. Thank you. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Colette. Then it's Fiona.
Thank you. The recommendations encapsulate the discussion that the group did have. But on the third bullet point, and going back to the discussion, I'd been under the understanding for some years that an efficiency was not a cut, but a way of doing things that was more efficient to save money or other resources, but didn't affect the frontline service. So the third bullet point doesn't quite reflect that principle.
Okay. Alison.
Thank you. I do not feel that I received full reassurance on how the proposed or considered demographic pressures will allow the officers to invest in, but then make significant savings from the connected, different connected programs. I did not get that feeling. Chris agreed that last year they had quite severely underestimated by 7.3% the adult disability pressures, etc. I would prefer to see members receive reassurance or assurance on how the proposed integrated plan members received assurance on how the proposed integrated plan has attempted to account, because reassurance I did not have. I look forward to my colleagues thinking about that change. Thank you.
Could I ask, I mean, I have some sympathy with that. There were obviously within, I thought Chris's answers were excellent. I mean, there were clearly, he highlighted some of the issues that they're confronted. One of which was the late year, I assume Q4, which is winter, where you will then get the spike. And it seemed to be the case. Spike, last year clearly had been higher than they thought. And maybe if we can somehow incorporate that we would want there to remain a focus on areas which have previously been challenging to predict.
I think that's an excellent addition.
Which sort of accepts, that clearly that we got assurances, which is a whole number of different aspects. But we did hear that the word difficulties which your question highlighted, and just to include that in our recommendation, remains risks. You're doing a fantastic job. It's trying to edit things by committee with in this way is challenging. And I should have said, I think we'll come up with some words. We can't be, I'm guessing at some point David is going to say, right, you've spent enough time on this, we're going to move on to the next one. We'll get some further words and then we'll circulate them, or Tim will circulate them. And then if there's anybody who's got concerns that it's not fair or accurate, we will seek to find a suitable form of words that's acceptable to everybody. So workforce pressures, insurance, investment, etc. Is there anything else? I've got Nigel. We did ask for information on the second question that you posed, which we didn't have time to answer. Nigel. You're muted.
Sorry, I haven't seen anything back yet. She was talking about more money, obviously, from switching direct payments on cards, recover everything more that they are entitled to. So, there was that, but that I think they were going to get back to us on that, weren't they?
Yes, that's what we said we would do if there wasn't time, that we would seek a written response, which I'm guessing should come to the group. And then if there's anything that
on my original question, I think Jane Albie did answer as well as she could on the efficiencies when I asked, was they without them impacting frontline services? And it's only a question of them being watched throughout the year, because obviously if they're talking about this hub, all to do with, connected person, the enablement care, again, learning disabilities, and obviously the changeover from 0 to 25, young people coming in, and it's making sure that those changes they put in, that there is that connection, that there is, that if they don't actually make sure that they're keeping in touch, then I think the front line would be affected. But they're saying they've got enough changes, or they've got enough, if you like, safeguards there to make sure that the front line isn't affected. I think she was implying, from all the different things that they're doing with their connected person on the hub, and all to do with disabled home care and everything else. So I think it's just, I accept what they say. that the efficiencies with everything they've put in place won't affect frontline services, but obviously that's something we need to be mindful throughout the year as it goes on, you know.
The operation, yes.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. We need to draw it to the close now because we've obviously
Can I
got
give Stella 30
three more
seconds?
groups.
Okay.
Okay,
Stella.
pass. Yeah, okay.
Good, thank you. Tina, are you there?
Stella.
You'll be next, Stella.
I was looking for Tina and Public Health and Community Safety.
Hiya. I think Stella still has her hand up.
I'm just taking it down.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, I couldn't see any hands. Beg your pardon, Stella, far away.
No, it's last question. I'd say it was okay. My question was number 2. I thought it was really well answered for this year. My concerns that the long-term plan for staffing and this ongoing increase in national insurance and the hike in minimum wage, etc., what is the plan for that over the term of this IP? How is it going to be funded? And also, more important, recruitment and retention, given the fact that our overseas staff are coming down. We're not losing who is here, but we are no longer we're not longer recruiting, and they were the hub, the core of our staff. So my concern is not so much this year. There's been an instant reaction. Yet we've done this over the next 2 to 3 years of this IP. Can we have more assurances about our staff strategy?
Okay, thank you very much. Right, good. We captured that.
Thank you.
We'll put that in the formal words. Tina,
Okay,
we're starting to run into time pressures, so
yeah,
crack
that's
on.
fine. Right, okay. So we've got the 2 recommendations there. Shall I go to Tim first, just to walk us through them?
Yeah. So. Thanks, Tina. Captured two areas here, and these aren't really in order that they were discussed, so I'm kind of doing it a bit backwards. Apologies for that. There was something around trading standards, prosecutions, and a promise from the officers to give members a bit more information about how receipts from prosecutions is divided between victim compensation, income into HCC, and then what goes back to central government. There was also a request for further information with regard to refugee services, and I think it was Alex that promised further information about those services and how they're divided between the different communities. So there was some talk about Ukrainians, Syrians, and I think a bit of confusion around that. So that there was an offer to provide some written clarification.
Yes.
I think you're on mute, Tina. We can see your lips moving, but we can't hear you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was just saying that we also talked about any follow-up regarding the defibrillators and a map being provided for that too. But going to other members of the group, have we got any feedback on these points? I'm going first to Colette.
Thank you, Tina. Excuse me. I thought that the explorations that we did were very good, but I was very concerned that the name of this committee is Public Health, and I don't think, unless I missed it, I don't think I saw any reference to public health whatsoever. And in fact, Sarah Perlman didn't make any contribution because there was nothing that applied to her area of that committee. And I do wonder, was that because nobody wanted to ask any questions about public health, or what? It did seem to me a substantial portion of the brief for that portfolio that was not even reflected on in any depth whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We can certainly have that as a bit of feedback, that we consider how this particular scrutiny has gone. But I think ultimately it was up to members to ask those questions and provide feedback on the queries, which didn't necessarily happen on this occasion. So I do think there's work there. Lawrence, please.
Just wanted to remind colleagues that this is all about money. We're really examining these issues in terms of, I don't use this stupid word IP, the budget, I call it. And the budget is very important at this time of year. And that's what this should be focusing on. That's why I think the first question about money received from trading standards is important. And on the second one about refugees, my understanding from what we were told was that we're actually saving money now because we're no longer housing the Afghanis. And certainly I had two of them, two hotels in my division in Bushey housing Afghanis a year ago, and both hotels are now empty. So can we make it clear that we are looking to know how much money has been saved rather than spent?
Yeah, good point, Lawrence.
Thank you. Is there anything else from anyone else on these?
Well, may I just suggest from the chair that what is happening to the money that's being saved? How is it being repurposed?
Yes, exactly.
I think that was something that came out in what we discussed in the request for the follow-up information was about that.
Okay, are your group about done, Tina, do you think?
Yeah, I think we're done.
Okay, thank you very much. In that case, I'll move on. And Jonathan will be sitting there ready to go. Jonathan?
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Good afternoon. We've put forward 3 possible recommendations. The first was about waste contracts. I don't know if John Hale's on the call. John, do you want to say anything about that? Oh, perhaps he's not.
Sorry, I am here. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I think on those contracts, the understanding was that they're in place now, but we think it's very important that they have strong procedures in place for monitoring them and making sure that if they don't perform, that they don't cost us. That's summary.
Yeah. Okay. And the second one was to do with the waste recycling centres. And I suppose there were 2 areas there really, because there's going to be a public consultation, and as we heard the officer Matt say earlier on during the scrutiny, that there might be, and it's in the report anyway, there might be alternative ways to deliver the same level of financial efficiencies. So they've got to come up with their complete proposals, which they haven't quite done yet. I know they're talking about 5 days instead of 7 days for 4 of the recycling centres, and they're talking about a booking system, but there are other aspects that they might be looking at. So once they've honed that, what we've suggested is that, you know, once they put that in place, that we look at it again, and maybe the panel looks at it again or after 9 months. And the other aspect of that particular one was to do with the people. If you have a booking system, what happens if you don't have a smartphone, you don't go online, you know, how does it really work? So that was the second one. And I know Richard couldn't make the little meeting we had earlier on, and I know you had concerns, Richard, and I don't know if you've seen what we've come up with for the third one. I mean, the third one is to do with reviewing guidance, looking at the bids. You see, we don't know about the bids, whether they're dodgy bids, whether they're quality bids, but obviously there need to be quality bids. And also there's that, you know, 3 million not been spent, so that we've sort of incorporated that within the third one. I don't know if anybody else. Richard, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't attend that one, but of course I was on the other session. But I think you've actually picked up precisely my concerns. Eric gave an answer for then, but it was going forward. There's 2.9 million almost of uncommitted funds is a lot of money, and I just wanted some assurance that we were looking to use that and direct it where it ought to be. And I'm grateful to you for your for putting bullet point 3 in. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Does anybody else on our scrutiny committee have anything to add to that? No? Okay. Thank you.
Yes, there is. There's a hand up gone up, Jonathan, but I'm not able to see who it is.
I think it's Richard again.
So, who is that?
It's gone down again.
Oh, okay, right.
It was me trying to take it off. Sorry.
Oh, no. Okay. I think that's it, David, from us.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. We'll move straight over then to portfolio 4 and highways and transport. Sandy.
Yes, I must say, I think we had a lot more out of it than that, although that is actually certainly an important one. I mean, we had 4 questions, and the first one was round the budget. And I think the words from Tony Boucher, which most struck us, I mean, 6 words, a little bit less of everything, quote unquote, is what he finally admitted, because the numbers were confusing and the way they were presented was confusing, frankly, and we had to work our way through it. I think that the team will chip in as well. I think that we did feel that there wasn't a sufficient answer on how they might be planning to work smarter and more efficiently, i.e., rather than just continuing how they operate now and spending a bit less. What evidence can they provide that they are going to be working in a smarter way to make the money go further? So that was, and I think whether Steve Jarvis, if he's on the call, wants to clarify or add to that, because it was his question. But is that it, Steve, really?
Yes, I think so. There was a lack of clarity about what might happen with the fewer resources, and I thought a lack of demonstration of an intention to investigate working smarter in order to reduce the impact of that.
Yeah, that's it. So further assurance that they are investigating working smarter to make up for the admitted reduction in revenue budgets. I mean, I'm sure they're better wording than that, but we can.
I don't think it's a reduction so much, Sandy, as the additional inflationtional pressures on.
Indeed.
On
okay. Well, yes, to make
up
it's
a real terms revenue. It's a real terms
for the real term cuts. Yes, for additional for the real term cuts in highways budget.
Yeah, good. That makes perfect sense.
Then we go into the flooding, and I think what we felt, we had a quick chat after the call, the team, is that yes, there seems to be some money available, but it wasn't clear what their objective is with that money, and is it to spend on the worst affected areas and spend big lumps of money at the worst affected areas? Is it a little bit more everywhere? Is it about rebuilding infrastructure or just trying to keep the existing infrastructure cleaner? So we just felt that there was a need for more clarity, the answers we got in the end left us with as many questions as we felt that there were answers. And we did admit this is an impossible situation without probably central government funding, given the scale of the issue. Richard, you've got your hand up.
Yes, Sandy. Finish what you're doing, because I want to come back on bullet point 2, but let's get the other one sorted first, please.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's probably fine as you've got it. I think there's an element of, and what is being done to get more central government funding for major infrastructure replacement.
Yeah, that's what I was going to add, Sandy.
Oh, fine. Jeff, I was reading your mind, you see.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there wasn't any, I don't think there was any discussion at all on upgrading the infrastructure that will obviously needs funding from government. Yeah.
So then, Richard, we'll come back to you on the second item. I'm just conscious of time.
Thank you, Sandy. I'm going to break the habit of a lifetime.
Yes. Yeah,
I'm going to break the habit of a lifetime and concede that I am now wearing an administration hat. And I don't like the word cuts. Can we use impact? Because it's not this iteration of the council that is chopping the budget. It's the concomitant reductions because of inflationary pressures and all of the other issues that are impacting. So I'm happy with I'm just happy on the inflation in whatever, but not cut, because we haven't taken an axe to the highway budget.
Okay,
we bang more of them in money and it's less effective.
Agreed. Right.
Yeah,
the last area was the 20 mph, and I think again this is probably just a request for a written explanation of what was said on the scrutiny. We really had slightly lost the plot about phasing and what was included and what wasn't. And we did feel that goalposts seemed to have been moved, and it wasn't entirely, we didn't fully understand the answer. So I think something just bringing us up to date and being clearer about the numbers. There were various numbers batted around about schemes that have been achieved, schemes under progress, schemes that might be halted. And it was quite a sort of wave, and it wasn't entirely clear. We didn't come out of it feeling we were fully informed.
Yeah.
And then going back to your Fiona, and you've got a hand raised.
Thank you. Yes, I think you've read my mind as well, Sandy. Actually, it was regarding the specific schemes, because there were lots of figures bandied about, but it wasn't so much on how it was being done, but the current situation on the specific schemes and also future identified schemes and the data, where we were on all of that.
Yeah. Okay. And then going back, Richard, did you want to talk about that?
Can I just come in, if I may? The question was clear. I mean, it was the question basically was about the ongoing capacity to carry out the schemes that are in the programme, and how many schemes were unfunded. We didn't really get an answer, so I'm glad that Fiona has come back and asked us to reinforce that.
Yeah, it was a simple question, and we didn't get a simple answer. No. So yes, and then going back to the top bullet, I mean, we all feel very strongly that it is a completely false economy. That, I mean, they actually just were quite clear that they were not going to fill the vacancies in ordinary highway enforcement. And the whole group, regardless of party, it was not anything to do with party, we all felt that was a very bad message to be sending out to our residents and council taxpayers. So I don't know how we say that, because I think we want to say that very firmly.
Yeah.
That, you know, they need to revisit this. So Tim and David, I need, yes, exactly. Yeah, yes. You were going well. You were doing well there, Tim. Yes.
Yeah.
Just to let you know, we've lost picture in the room. Some of you have got it on laptops, but the major screen that we've been relying on, we've lost picture, but we've got audio.
Right. We can see. We're seeing okay.
Yeah. If we look a bit confused and puzzled, that's because we're hearing the words, we're not seeing the picture.
Oh well, the words are coming across the screen. They've suddenly paused.
Yes.
Could. Oh yeah, it could. Yes.
I think Tim's cheating and using some clever word capture software to actually.
Yeah, okay. I mean, we can improve this, but that is the point. And I think we all felt that we have residents who are furious when they see developers being allowed to get away with damaging public assets. I've got Richard and Fiona both waving hands. So Richard, is this a legacy hand, Richard? Looks like
hopefully they're supporting your stance on that, because we do need to move on. So if we're drawing to a close here, I would encourage it, because we need to give Stella and her group a chance to feed in. So if you're done with that one, Stella, are you there?
Sandy, my hand's up.
I've been overruled by David. Why is Stella coming in? What is Stella to do? Don't understand. We've done all the groups. Yes.
Thank you for Sandy. What does Stella do? How long you got?
Yeah, I'm looking at the wrong piece of paper.
How long you got, Sandy? I'll tell you what I do.
We just want to see Stella.
Yeah.
From Richard and a hand from.
Lovely. I'm after lunch.
We got. I'm just saying we're operating across. We're operating across several screens here, but there's a hand. There are hands up.
Yes, it's
Richard
Fiona
and then
Richard.
Fiona.
Well, I was going to say Fiona, then Richard.
My apologies. I'm trying to get the hand down. There's some. Yes. Fiona's the one who wants to speak. I'm happy.
Yeah. Right, Fiona.
Okay, mine's very quick. It's basically ensuring, it's linked in with what's already been said, but ensuring we're much stronger on recovering funds for reinstatement of where damages have been carried out with developers, and making the developers and utility companies far more accountable. And that links in, I think, to the enforcement, but I think that does need to be put in there somewhere, because it's really important.
Tim, I'm sure you can come up with some wording.
Might I interject there, just say that obviously a lot of this stuff could be perhaps better partnership working with the local planning authorities within the county.
Yes,
around
absolutely.
The aspirations that our highways department might want to see.
Yeah.
Is somebody prepared to put words around that?
Yes,
and conditions, David.
Tim is doing a brilliant
conditions.
job. Yep.
And it should be developers and utilities are held to account. It's not just developers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Utility companies.
And planning conditions.
I think Tim can come up with the words. I'm conscious that we've passed the 12:30 witching hour. I think we can go and grab some lunch, and Tim can get the words right.
Okay, that's good. All right, many thanks. We will recommence at 1:30 and get into the afternoon session. Thank you so much to everybody this morning. It's been really, really quite excellent. I think we've heard some very good things. I think officers and departments are working well and effectively. Those who have done this for a number of years have seen year on year the reduction in funding and what have you that the officers have really run with, and I'm sure they will continue to produce services under the new regime as we go into the next 4 or 5 years. But thanks so much. We'll see you at 13:30.
The afternoon session will be on a different meeting.